Welcome back to day number 1 of Season 10 of the SMITE Pro League. We've got one more best of 3 for you on this fine Friday afternoon. Already a 2-0 for the Highland Ravens over the Atlantis Leviathans in a great set to round out our day here today. It's the Kings up against the Dragons. And we've got awesome SMITE for you all weekend long in our kickoff weekend because, my goodness, the teams this year are looking competitive. The kickoff tournament was the tip of the iceberg. And 6 more SPL matches after today to watch throughout this weekend. Camelot Kings, Jade Dragons finish off our day here on Friday. Starting off our day tomorrow, Styx Ferrymen, Gilded Gladiators with a great one. Oni Warriors, Leviathans to end it. And then Jade Dragons, Gilded Gladiators to end our weekend. And so really, we're going to get a little taste of all of these teams. Highland Ravens, they've got another match tomorrow. Every team you'll get a couple of looks at here in the opening weekend of the SMITE Pro League. Let's talk a bit about the one we've got for you here, as Dolson is joined by Mifflin for Kings versus Jade Dragons. Miff, one of these teams completely unchanged from last year. The other of the two teams, a core, but with a couple swaps over on the other side. And I think starting with the Kings makes the most sense. You're defending Season 9 SMITE World Champions, sticking with the same roster for this year.
A team and roster that seem to thrive in a solved meta. When the game is understood at a high level, when things haven't changed for a while, the Camelot Kings are able to hone their craft, maybe more so than anybody else in SMITE history. With that said, we're currently in a bit of a transitory meta where things have been changing constantly in year 10. No longer season 10. It's year 10 with 4 seasons to boot. So every single one of those has seen massive meta shifts, itemization changes, objective changes, map changes. And I think in this period of time, that could be where the Camelot Kings falter a bit while they still try and establish what it is and how exactly they want to play. When we've spoken with the Camelot Kings in the past, they had said our slow, methodical nature, not necessarily a product of our own machinations, but instead just the best way to win the game, right? They don't necessarily choose to play slowly. So perhaps we've had an opportunity now while this long down period, this off season, the Camelot Kings can develop a faster style, or maybe they've figured things out that we haven't quite seen just yet. But regardless, haven't had too many opportunities to see the Kings, and last time we did, they still do perform very well, only falling to the Oni Warriors, and the Oni Warriors look nearly untouchable at that kickoff event.
Unscathed even.
Unscathed. Untouched.
No, that's the Camelot Kings we're talking about here.
Oh, man.
It's going to be hard to beat this Kings team, to your point, in a solved meta. I think the question then is, when does this meta start to shake down, and how well do the Kings play into that style of meta? This is the team that loves objectives, forcing fights, loves a meta where the objective dictates when the fights happen. We've seen a bit of that so far in the kickoff tournament and in our first set of the weekend. The guy on your screen right there, BigManTingz, pivotal to what this team has got, and your world's MVP in genetics alongside of him. So BigManTingz, Miff, you're looking at a mid laner who has consistently been one of the best in the world. Obviously now able to join his team here on LAN, will be here alongside his squad throughout the year. And with so much talent around BigManTingz, you know, it's easy for all of the everything to kind of get muddled together when talking about some of the good boosts that this King squad has. But when you look at BMT and sort of his pedigree amongst mid laners, it's got to be a conversation piece for the Jade Dragons here, and someone they've got to identify, someone they've got to shut down. Maybe not unlike what we saw the Ravens do to Shinto in our second game of the previous set.
Yeah, jumping on a BigManTingz, certainly one way to get things rolling. I think certainly one of the more consistent players in the Camelot Kings. BMT, I cannot look at any individual match and say this is lost because BMT did X or Y or didn't do Z. So often just playing perfectly around the rest of his team. And so far here in year 10 has had a stagnant god pool when compared in season 9. Baba Yaga, Merlin, Discordia, Tiamat in the last 6. And I imagine we see a good deal more of that today, so long as the bans don't stop them. But the Camelot Kings are a team comprised of 5 incredibly talented players. CaptainTwig has had some shut-up performances in his last couple of sets. Generally has been regarded as one of the best facilitator junglers in the league. Certainly capable of putting on his hyper carry pants when the need should arise. Otherwise, I've been quoted as saying, and I will continue to say, that I think Genetics is probably the pound-for-pound best SMITE player in the world right now, regardless of role, especially after his absolutely dominant run during the Season 9 World Championship. Felt like he could do just about no wrong.
Yep.
And then around him are some multi-role prodigies. Jarcorrr in the conversation, one of the best Smite players of all time as well. You've got Variety, who, you know, maybe the most susceptible to some iffy slash lines, but still certainly capable of locking down his lane and facilitating the rest of his team. I've loved every single bit of the Camelot Kings. They're a fan favorite. They're the world champions, and they've got all that pedigree and all those awards to their name for good reason.
For good reason. And they'll step into this matchup against a very closely, I would say, ranked opponent for where we are in the season right now, Myth, and the Jade Dragons, a team that are centered around this core of the SSG, kind of Oni Warrior squad from last year, between Nika, Dardez, Vote. But it's a team that, see them on the left side of your screen there, added Mike in support, LASBRA out of the jungle. How different do you think this Jade Dragons team plays around a similar core with Mike, with Laz?
I think that any team, the heart of it can be found in support and jungle. Support and jungle dictate how you play the game, when you get active, what style of team this is. If you've got a hyper-active jungler like LASBRA and a hyper-active support player like PBM, it probably means the Jade Dragons or the Oni Warriors core of Dardez, Vote, and Nika will have to match that pace. We did put out some interviews, some surveys recently, and Vote in particular stated that he sees himself as more so a farm up till late game style player, wait it out, get to level 20, hyper carry from there. Dardez, a self-reported playmaker, means that the Jade Dragons maybe show their hand a bit early, could play through that mid 3v3 or perhaps around that soul lane. But otherwise, I think this is going to be a very different look at every single one of these players. LASBRA was on a generally slower paced team with the Olympus Bolts. PBM had the Jazzberry Jammers. I think he's going to have to rein in a little bit to match the pace of this Oni Warriors core. And then the brain power of the previous Oni Warriors team was Neoma. He's no longer with these guys. Now you're going to have to rely on the decision-making prowess of PBM and LASBRA as in-game leaders. So I think a whole lot of potential here for the Jade Dragons to switch things up. I do imagine, though, that we see a good deal of growing pains with a team like this because it feels like such a radical shift for the backline in particular of the Jade Dragons as they adjust to their new leaders here.
Yeah, and this is a team that had success at that kickoff tournament in Myth. I mean, they made their way to the finals, but simply could not keep up with the Oni Warriors at that event.
They were so fast.
Again, we're not gleaning too much from that kickoff tournament, right? There's not that much data.
How did they not get a ticket?
To what?
Because they were going so fast.
All right. That was, look, that's not your best, Myth.
Look, we've been here for 10 minutes already. I got to do something.
No, you're right. But I think this Jade Dragons team does have potential. We use the word growing pains a lot, but I do think you're onto something with just needing to figure out one another and how they want to play the game. But some early indicators from what we saw at the kickoff tournament might give you some hope. You got 3-0'd by the Oni Warriors in the finals, but you were able to take it to a couple of your opponents earlier on during that event. And so this Jade Dragons team, I think, lofty hopes for the year, but also realizing we're pretty early into the season, and there's a lot to lean on. Now remember, all 10 players in these matches streaming their POVs on their own personal Twitch channels. You got 10 to choose from. You only have one monitor at home. Super unlucky. Which of the 10 are you putting on your screen?
Yeah, I would just go junglers every single time. Junglers literally every time. I feel like that's just one of the most interesting things to watch. So if you're a Jade Dragons fan and you got to get that POV rolling, watch LASBRA. Feels like he might be the pace setter for the Jade Dragons. For the Camelot Kings, CaptainTwig's your guy. That's Benjamin Knight.
Do you remember who you have on your fantasy team, Neith?
Like all of them?
Yeah.
I know the first 3 for sure because I was going for a bit, and then so I got Cyclone Spin.
Yeah.
I've got Baskin.
Do you have anyone in this game, I guess is what I'm getting at. Do you remember?
Oh, man. I do not. I don't have any of these guys.
I've got Dardez. I went Dardez out of mid, and let me tell you why.
Okay. He's the Parisian junior badminton champion.
Which is wild to me, but still incredibly impressive. He's got great hand-eye coordination.
That's why he does what he does.
I think that this is a team that can really start to grow around this core. I think we're going to see a new identity from mid, and Vote, I think, would have been a good pick during our fantasy draft as well, because I think we're potentially in a new era of Jade Dragons and the way that their carries are able to play this game. So I went Dardez on one side. I also have CaptainTwig, playing for my fantasy team on the other side of the map.
Feels like the success of your two players in this match are mutually exclusive.
That's right. They rely on one of the other
downfall
to do
of the
bad.
other. Yeah.
That's right. And both in the past have had their downfalls, right?
That's true.
They've both been pretty hit or miss players in the past. Would have loved to have had Twig during the Worlds run. But I think that's going to be a battle worth looking at. You talk about watching the junglers. Twig v LASBRA is always going to be an interesting matchup to watch. Not only LASBRA versus Twig, but LASBRA versus Genetics, initiators, the heartbeat of the team. As Mifflin said just a bit earlier on, and both LASBRA and Genetics sat down for a pregame interview.
I thought the Dragons did okay. They did about as good as I thought they would for a new team with a new core. I did say to the Warriors before the matchup with us versus them in the semi-final that whoever won would stomp the Dragons. They struggled against Leviathans a little bit with the sub, but they were looking okay. But I knew they wouldn't win the tournament. Warriors are just too good.
I mean, you can kind of be surprised that they struggle a little bit, considering they just won the World Championship. But again, this tournament is also way smaller, so less prep, maybe less scrims and preparation going into this tournament. So I'm sure when it comes to the regular season, they're going to be caught up and they'll be very strong. So our style going into this new team with the Warriors core, Mike and me, it would be me and Mike kind of taking over a lot of the communication, shot calling, but we get a lot of input from the Warriors core, and they come in with a lot of great inputs, so we kind of have a little bit of everything.
I feel like they should be playing through LASBRA and Mike, who are very good and proactive players with good comms, and the only Warriors core should kind of slot into play as like a bit of a puzzle piece. They're probably a lot more pressure and a lot more proactive than they were last year, overall with the combination of LASBRA and PBM. I think honestly it depends on how we play the map and whether we're down 0-18 in the first 5 minutes or whether we're even and going into late game. If we're going into late game even, we'll probably beat them. But right now, it's not too solid from the boys.
I think we have a pretty good read on what we're looking to do after this playoff tournament, and just need to get some good practice, and I'm sure we'll beat them.
Confidence from Laz there at the end, Miff. Did you hear that? He is sure that they will beat the
Well, there were
Camelot
some
Kings.
qualifiers on that.
No.
Okay.
Well, he said he was sure, nothing else. No, he said what? They're going to come in with good practice.
That's right. If they get good practice and they could
Was there
refine,
an if? I missed the
refine
if.
what they had practiced during the
Got
play-in tournament.
Well, let's talk about LASBRA during the play-in tournament, Miff. Susano, we're still viable on the Susano in the last couple of weeks. Daji saw some play. Ratatoskr was good. I think my brain, always goes back to the Athena jungle that we saw LASBRA playing a bit. And I think that was one of the unique conversation starting pieces that we had with this Jade Dragons team. Was it felt like LASBRA, felt like Dardez were kind of sticking with their standard god pools but making it fit into a different roster this year. I wonder if that's the type of thing that the Dragons have been able to refine. The unique kind of eclectic picks that we see a couple of their players play.
Yeah, I think you're right to bring up Dardez in particular for some of those eclectic picks. The Hera immediately jumps to my mind as something that nobody else is doing right now. Good facilitation, decent
Always
damage
on my
output
mind.
as well. But as far as LASBRA and bringing up his god pool, I think just the standard assassin pool is LASBRA, right?
Nope.
Add in
Nope.
the Athena, of course. But besides that, has he really gone towards the mages that we've seen from maybe some of these SEC junglers, the Hebos, the Alquongs, things along those lines? Haven't necessarily seen that. Certainly not within his last 6 games.
I guess I'm letting 2 Athena games live rent-free in my head right
But,
now.
he is an Athena. He's like the only guy running Athena. I think Scream ran it a bit in Season 9, but otherwise it's just LASBRA, and he made it look very good.
Yeah.
The meta certainly does fit Athena. If you want to go do more of Desolation, you could do it just like any other mage / guardian could out of the jungle. So maybe something we have to keep our eyes on in P's and B's as we start to develop towards that point.
Who's got the lightning bolts in this room? Only Mike, right? Mike should be the only one who's got the world championship.
I'm not a SMITE historian, man.
I mean,
I could tell you,
like,
if we want to talk about the room, like the player booths, like everybody on the King side got
There he
one for
goes.
sure.
oh, and you know who else has one?
Who's that?
The guy standing behind him adminning the player booth right now. Kabam's got himself a lightning bolt.
That's right.
I wonder. I kind of joked with Zap and Adapting earlier because Adapting walked out and he had the 2 lightning bolts on his collar for the 2 world championships that he won. I kind of joked. Adapting thought it was pretty cool. And then Zapman walks out a moment later who's got 3 and not within earshot of adapting. Adapting had walked by, and Zap was like, yeah, I mean, if there's ever any discussion or any pick and ban issues that come up, I just flex the 3 lightning bolts to the 2 of adapting, and he wins in those
Settles
moments.
the arguments.
Right, and so I think Mike now has that power amongst his teammates. Fellas, take a peek at the collar.
Look, I've been there before. I'll lead us there again. Just follow my lead.
Would you proudly wear a lightning bolt on all your caster? We need to get you a pin, Myth.
No.
You wouldn't proudly wear one, or you wouldn't wear one in general?
If I was told to wear a lightning bolt, I would.
There you go.
The pride that I have in my accomplishments has diminished severely throughout the years through continuous and harsh admonishments from the community. Twitter, Twitch, Reddit, they all let me know it's Mickey.
Right,
so I
understood.
I do not bring it up often.
Gotten. You've let other people dictate how you feel about
That's
things.
right.
Myth.
That's right. I am a weak-willed, just squishy-brained loser. No wrinkles.
Well, Myth, a team that is not weak-brained, squishy, or losers is this squad right here, the Kings. They don't need the lightning bolts on the collars because they've got the black and gold champions jerseys.
And they got the hammer, too.
That's right.
They brought a blunt force weapon to the studio.
That's right, and they plop that thing down right in the front of the booth there. They're going to be defending it all year long. And we sat down, and I guess I sat down with them to do their team check-in. You know, it's a team that had their opportunities to change things around in the postseason. I think the way I got my read was that a few of the individual players had opportunities to shift around and maybe worlds where this roster does look a bit different. But I think ultimately they all sat down, talked with one another, and said, we are far too good at worlds, and we were far too good of a team towards the end of last year to want to mix things up. Why wouldn't you run things back after how successful the Worlds run was for this team? Remember, not only was it Twig's first Worlds.
First Worlds win.
Worlds win, right.
Yeah.
Well, he's been
all
of them. Right. First Worlds win. Variety got his first Worlds win after one of the best solo lane performances we've seen at a World Championship. What was that, season 3 or 4 or something like that? And Variety looked near unstoppable in one of those events, falling just short. Tingz, Genetics. Yark would have the double lightning bolt. Also needs a couple for each role that he's playing.
Oh, that'd be cool. We should age the lightning bolts. Like, what if Adapting's lightning bolts had old man beards because it's been so long? That'd be cool.
What, season 1 has a tattered hat?
Yeah, a tattered hat with a massive check carried by it too, as well.
That's right, the big old season 1 Worlds check. Anyway, we'll get into game 1 shortly here between the Dragons and the Camelot Kings. Have no fear. I was going to ask you to put your chips on one side of the table here with this matchup here, Myth, and I don't want to phrase it that way for you. Does the consistency, the team play of the Camelot Kings, you think, win the day here in a matchup between the Kings and the Dragons as we get into picks and bans for game number 1?
You know, had I had just a little bit more data on the Kings in year 10, I might be willing to bet on them. But if we're talking about, a new emergent meta, I feel like that does favor the Jade Dragons a bit more. So, you got me under duress. I got to make a decision, right? I'm probably going to the Jade Dragons.
Surely we're allowed to say duress again at this point, right?
I'm taking it back.
It's been far too long.
And you know what? It needs to be here.
It needs to be back. Season 10, the year of duress. It makes its return.
Oh, season of duress?
Season of duress.
That's good.
That's good. That's good thinking. Let's talk about picks and bans, though, between Jade Dragons and Kings for game number 1. Aphrodite, Athena. I'm telling you, Myth. It's there. I don't know why you disagreed. I don't know why you said LASBRA can't. I don't know why you said LASBRA can't play Athena.
It's because it's banned. That's how the game works.
Yeah, fair enough. Hera also taken away. So a couple of those individual unique picks that we've talked about banned away. And Martichoras for the first time in the SMITE Pro League, first weekend available, but it's been banned out 100% of the time. The Dragons will get it first. See,
I had a feeling that if any SPL team was going to break out the Martichoras, it would be the Jade Dragons. Because when you look at the stats of Marty and his abilities and how they pan out, it's literally AMC 2.0. And that's Dardez, right? That's having seen none of the 9 other picks in this lobby or the bans, I am willing to bet everything I have that this is going to be Dardez in mid playing
And
Marty.
he's playing it over an AMC that was still available.
That's right, because AMC's penetration's been nerfed down to 10%. Marty's still got 40 if he's landing his ultimate properly. He still has massive ability-based damage that's got great clear throughout the early, good generator of pressure. Dardez, a self-proclaimed playmaker, fits his play style. It's a hunter. It's even safer than AMC because you can remove yourself from the playfield. I'm talking myself into it more and more every time I hear about it.
How disruptive do you think the laying the patches of grass ultimately ends up being at the pro level? Do you think disruptive at all to totally game-breaking disruptive? Somewhere in the middle?
It's somewhere in the middle. I think
you probably got to lay a few of them out.
Yeah,
right?
as pro play develops, I feel like communication should be able to deal with the majority of like this conditional stealth.
There's got to be a dude in this patch of grass.
Guys,
right?
there's this really conspicuous patch of grass in the fire giant, and I swear there were 5 guys there just a minute ago.
And then when you're thinking that, they're actually wrapping around behind you and fighting you. It's the
In the other patch of grass. Oh my god.
Right, which one is it? It's just such a unique mechanic. I'm hoping we see something with it at some point throughout the year here. What a support battle we've got. Mike versus Genetics, World's MVP on one side, World Champion on either side of the screen. 2 playmakers for their respective teams. Hercules plus Hebo. So bits of CC for the Camelot Kings. Also good damage numbers at different phases of the game without reviewing all that much. And Guan Yu picked a couple of times already, both by the Ravens, both wins.
Guan Yu, less healing overall than he once had, but now gives over CDR to his team. Anyone affected by the heal, that is, 1 second off their non-ultimate cooldown. So a lot of utility here for an ability-based composition already, which is starting to round out for the Jade Dragons. Martichoras very reliant on those cooldowns. Susano, of course, has the auto-cancels, but generally is not auto-attacking otherwise, so really is reliant on those cooldowns as well. Guan Yu should facilitate that play style a good deal, especially in the late game engagements, dances around the Fire Giant and the Gold Fury. He'll also act as your primary initiator for the most part, with great targets like Hebo on the other side. If you could force out a crushing wave defensively, you've already done so much work for the Jade Dragons. With that said, though, I just feel like Hercules is in such a good spot right now. Maybe in the conversation of best gods in the game right now, as far as I'm concerned, in my opinion at least. Just because of the non-committal initiation, the lower CDs of his abilities, now in 10-3 or 10-4, excuse me. Just makes Hercules so good at displacing the enemies. Still is very survivable in a world where the majority of healing has taken a hit. Hercules has taken a hit from his healing, but it doesn't seem to have affected him nearly as much as some of these other self-sustained gods. I really do like what the Camelot Kings have lined up with their top 3.
It's a Kings team that has a lot of unique potential in their top 3 as well. Chernobog can be disruptive depending on how it's played, where those ultimates end up landing, and a lot of value for both teams. You're still potentially wondering where this Hebo is going to go, though largely centered in the jungle from what we've seen. However, we've seen mid laners play it.
Twig loves it.
Twig does love this style of pick. But I'll slap a TBD on it just to give ourselves a little leeway down the stretch. Support bans awaiting until the final wave here. Remember, Aphrodite received a lot of attention in the offseason, still going to get first banned by the Kings. Mike is going to play that pick. You think every single time he's going to get the opportunity. Hell falls into a similar conversation. And Vamana getting some love. Adapting played it a couple times in the first set today. Did not find success, but had his moments for sure. Apparently still strong enough that Dragon sensing maybe a jungle pick still needed, not wanting to go up against that on the flip side. Which leaves the Kings open with a lot of opportunity here, Miff, in order to fill some gaps that their roster might have.
I really do feel like the Dragons are projecting that Hebo for the jungle, so maybe they're worried of Hercules support as opposed to Hercules solo. Then you have Vamana hold down that role there. We'll see, and we'll get a better idea of it as picks and bans continue. For now, I'm assuming the Camelot Kings still need a support and a mid laner. The Jade Dragons in need of an ADC and a support, assuming that Guan Yu is headed for the soul lane.
Mid.
With Neith locked in, I think that is the mid laner. BigManTingz, one of his bread and butter, loves that global presence. We've seen a good deal of the one-shot build with the Mannequin Scepter, Hidden Blade, excuse me. Transcendence ability style build, which seems to have come back a bit. Martichoras making great use of the Transcendence Jotun's Crusher style of build a little bit earlier on today. Neith certainly capable of doing the exact same. But this does give over a very telegraphed escape on a team composition now for the Camelot Kings that is pretty susceptible to dive. Feels like Guan Yu has a really strong matchup in a Neith. Feels good into the Hebo as well. This is one where the Jade Dragons, Guan Yu in particular, I think could really be the difference maker.
Could be a game wrecker for sure. Remember, pacing from the Jade Dragons might be a bit different from what you expected just with that team name from the roster last year. Mike is still around from this team and have the potential to run things down very quickly, at least from what we saw in that kickoff tournament, but can play a bit more calculated. There's an Agni hover and an Agni lock-in, so...
Feeling like Boo Boo the Fool out here.
Looks like Marty the Manticore may actually be headed for duo lane, leaving Dardez the Agni in mid.
It's a good matchup underneath again. If you are within range to put her into a backflip, if she's worried about that stun from Rainfire, Noxious Fumes, generally Agni can still follow it up, chase you down pretty easily. A dash forward or perhaps just another bomb placed a little bit further back. Should be able to connect there.
I forgot about this.
Dude, yeah, Maui made it this far. Me too, man. That got us.
I don't know where else.
Absolutely dominant. Genetics has a miracle run with this pick, and it felt like no one was going to let him have it anymore. Maybe 4 months downtime will do that to you. You forget about it.
Didn't it feel like, I mean, we're rewinding to Season 9 finals now, but it was Game 3, picks and bans. You saw Maui hovered and locked in for the Kings, and in that moment I was like, all right, Genetics is just going to do it again.
And then he hit a 4-man pool later that same game. And
that's right.
Yeah, well, could have been avoided.
Could have been avoided with the ban. You're hoping, if you're the Jade Dragons, you do not fall into that trap. So now we get a first look at all 5 gods for both of these two teams. Dragons versus Kings. Miff, who do you like in the early game to start setting the pace here in Game 1?
Early game, I'm probably leaning a bit towards the Camelot Kings. Just because Hebo out of the jungle, I believe, should outscale early and even late up against Susano. Just do more of Spear of Desolation. Just a ridiculous combo right now. So much movement speed, so much power, and you stack your penetration very early on. Susano's got good counter matchups, though. Could chase out that Neith and that Chernobog, make it a bit difficult for them to escape. But as far as early game in particular, just feels like the Camelot Kings combo is a little bit easier to execute on, and they've got clear, defined kill confirmation tools. Crushing Wave, no matter what. I mean, if you're getting hit by that at level 5, you're probably not walking away from it.
Season of defense about to begin for the Camelot Kings. After winning the Smite World Championship convincingly in Season 9, a new year for everyone in the league except for the Camelot Kings. We've had teams with complete overhaul. We've had teams with just a change or two. Camelot Kings untouched on their roster. Now the Jade Dragons. Got to get them all out now because later in the year that's not going to fly anymore. Jade Dragons, this is a team I think built around the potential that the Nika Dardez vote core has, sensing that maybe the initiation and the early game, if you change out some jungle, some support stuff, maybe that core starts to play a bit differently, a bit better, and we'll have to see if that's what ends up unfolding so far here this year. Eyes go on Marty, Miff. It's going to be the first time we see it in competitive play. Are you slating this for hyper carry style of pick?
I think it might be more of a spotlight style pick. Hey, I hit X with my ultimate. They now no longer have any defense. Let's go ahead and jump on them. That said, Marty's in a unique position where it's not like AMC, where Stinger is just throw it out, pick it up later, you got it back quickly. It's just essentially a bit of your burst. If you want to utilize the defense shred of Death from Above, you're also losing your best survivability tool as well.
Miff, let's delay no further. Camelot Kings, Jade Dragons. It's game number 1 with J-Mac and Gormizer.
Thank you so much, Dave and Miff. We jump into our second set of the day. And what a banger of a set we get, Gormizer. The Jade Dragons and the Camelot Kings to square off in the first week of Season 10 of the Smite Pro League. And a couple of new picks to pop back around, specifically the Martichoras. That's something that we got to see a little bit earlier in the day, Gore, for the SCC. We're now getting to see his SPL debut, but in a different role. We saw him in mid earlier. How do you feel about Marty over in the duo lane, though?
Honestly, I think a lot of the powers that he has in mid, he still has in duo. But, you know, self-proclaimed from Vote, likes to AFK farm until late, right? So probably a different presence than what we get to see out of mid. Because in mid, you expect him to be active. You expect him to be present. You expect it to be constant. with Vote hanging out over there, depending on how Mike wants that lane to go, and admittedly, depending on how Vote wants the lane to go, we might not be talking too much about him as time goes on. As Mifflin had said, right, your best escape, your best survivability in kit is also some of your best aggression, so you really have to choose. I wouldn't be surprised if super early on in this game it's used, especially once he hits level 5, more or less just for disengage, dodging out a Neith ult that gets shot your way. Then we start to see him using it for engage. As the late game comes around, you get the almost full build Vote joining in these 5-on-5s that'll be happening, whether it's around Fury Pit or over in Fire Giant. Wherever they happen to be, that's when his ult is going to become a much more aggression tool.
Interesting that Dardez picks up the speed buff on the first clear of the jungle camp, so won't have access to the extra burst damage, but will have a little bit of extra movement and mobility through the lane. Genetics rooted out, slowed down. It's the double horrific, but a pullback from Mike. Try and get things going once more. But Genetics will be out, just by the good graces of some nice utilization of the walls around him to block off paths. Dive back in by Genetics, who was under fire a moment ago, still willing to step up to the Dragons.
Honestly, I love this, right? When you have Atlas, one of the best things in his kit is that right there. You can just pick somebody up and throw them right back to your carry.
Genetics stuck in the acid rain for a little bit, auto-blocked by Jarcorrr. Because of that, Genetics able to walk away. But Marty plus Atlas so far proving to be a dominant dual lane for the Jade Dragon score.
Yeah, honestly, I love it. Not only because you get to see Vote a little more active, I think, early on than we've really gotten to see in seasons past, but also Mike's just playing the character well. You've got someone who can be aggressive. Maui can be as well, right? The hooks can punish you, so you have to play it carefully. But Mike's got a lot of good disruption for that, a lot of good ways to deal with it. And as long as he's the one getting hit and not Vote, it makes things a little bit easier to push Genetics down. Plus, Maui, at least what we've seen, while those hooks are really good, stun is really nice. First couple of levels, you're trying to kind of get things online, get into the position you want to be. Now's when you really can start picking things up at level 3.
Genetics falling low. Couple more autos from Mike and Vote should do it, but just missing out on a couple of them. Once again, Genetics put down to just under 200 HP, but able to walk back yet again. Aggression, the name of the game for the Dragons dual lane. And maybe also a tale of two builds for the supports as well. We've been seeing a little bit of back and forth on some of these support builds. Mike going to be going for the Sentinels into what I imagine will be Prophetic Cloak. Opposite side, Genetics going towards what I gotta imagine would be the Heroism, an item that has seen a little bit of changes over time. Got a little bit less shielding, but still been a potent pickup for a lot of the support players.
Yeah, honestly, I really like the way that they have at least been leaning towards some of these, I guess, call them standard items overall. A lot of support didn't change too much, right? The biggest conversation around it, and honestly I think Mike was having, it was really just the stacks on whether or not you're going to go for your Prophetic Cloak immediately and try to get as many stacks as you physically can online as fast as possible, or if you were going to go for, let's say, Thebes still, start stacking that the long way, get a lot of tankiness from the item, then you get your Prophetic Cloak. That's the conversation this season. It hasn't really been as in-depth as looking at, your Doom Orbs for some of the assassins, whether or not Transcendence is where you're going to go, things like that. And so I think it's a little more cut and dry. But you're going to see, at least Mike's tendencies so far, and this is just from the games we saw at kickoff, have been to rush the Prophetic Cloak, get as many stacks as possible. The games that they lost, Mike's not getting any stacks at all. The games that they're winning, he's just so far ahead of the other support that he's got a ton of prots online really early. So keep an eye on him, keep an eye on his items, and then assuming he does go for that Prophetic Cloak immediately, keep an eye on his stacks, because that's where it's really going to make the difference.
Mike standing in the edge of the grass. Genetics now being ganked by LASBRA as well. This should be a first blood for the Jade Dragons. Question is who's going to get it. Swinging away to buy some time. Genetics, and now Jarcorr's shown up. Death from above for Vote. Will get first blood, but crushing away by CaptainTwig will take LASBRA out of the fight. Quick blink by the Susano. A pickup by Mike, but not a full grab. Instead, now it's Mike being turned on. Has to dash away from Yark. And Vote will stand his ground to keep his team alive.
If Vote had a teensy bit more mana, there's a second kill there. It's just unfortunate that he's absolutely out-tapped. LASBRA couldn't get back in the fight because of the health bar, especially against a Hebo this early on. Whether, it's just tier 2 Doom Orb right now, that's still enough with a Hebo to get you at that health bar, less than a third to kill you off. So very, very well played, or at least well reasoned by the Dragons to get their kill and get out. Just an unfortunate scenario that it couldn't result in even more from them. And so I think keeping an eye on specifically what they're going to do with this lead, especially you get it over onto Vote. Gone for a Transcendence, which plays into his playstyle pretty well, right? It's going to be relatively slow, good stats on the item still, but we might not see a ton from him overall. I think a lot of the new explosive nature is either still going to be oriented around where Mike is, right? A good pickup that's going to create a fight no matter where you are. Probably over in mid a lot though, right? Neith, ult online, going to be able to create a lot of gank opportunities for Twig that maybe wouldn't have existed otherwise. I anticipate genetics starting to rotate, get a little more hands-on soon. We haven't gotten to see, he just hit level 5, so haven't seen a big ultimate from him yet. And we haven't really seen a big hook from him either. And so I'm keeping eyes on Maui. He had one of the best performances at Worlds, period, on this god. So I'm just waiting for that.
Now, I will say, when we saw Marty was making his way to SPL, I was wondering how some of the pros would utilize the grass. Because
yeah,
in a lot of games that I've either played Marty or that I've had Marty on my team or against me, they typically drop one in the middle of the lane, they drop one into a jungle corridor so they have a way to get out, the extra movement speed. Votus placed his right on the very edge of the wall.
I love this so much because it blends just enough of the map. Like you can see that's bright green compared to the blue of everything else. You should know that it's different, but you can still hide right there, and it's such a narrow pathway that you really have to be worried about it because right now you know there's probably no one in there. But if Mike's not been on the map for a second, all of a sudden you're stressing out. Turns out he's over in the right jungle. He's not doing anything over here, but now you're worried just about this little sliver of grass that's just next to a pillar. I love this. And I'm going to be honest with you, I've never thought of even trying something like this.
Mike is like just on the edge to where he's still stealth. Like, I don't know if Yark knows he's there. Now Yark knows because Mike stepped out of the grass. So yes, now he knows that Mike is there, but that's twice now we've seen Mike utilize that grass. First time netted a kill, this time not so much.
And they got to be happy right now that it's such a blue-oriented map. Like the greens aren't that vibrant because it's at least noticeable right now, right? As compared to, I'm thinking at the beginning of the year, it felt like the greens were very vibrant, very illustrious.
Tingz, quick beads, gets him away from the second bomb from Dardez. Now a kill. Maybe on the Yark. No, the pulse just off the mark. And the Gamma Burst was avoided by the dash into the wall. Jarcorrr lives to tell the tale. Has ult if he wants to dash back into wave, maybe a little aggressively. Now with Mike leaving the duo lane. Instead, it'll be the long walk for Yark back to duo.
And look, here's the thing. It's going to be a longer walk, but at this point, who cares? You're not dead, right? And I think the same thing goes for Tingz. Who cares? You're not dead. That's a lot of investment early on. Not crazy ults outside of Mike's. But you aren't getting that kill. You're trying to channel some of the early game aggression that we're kind of used to seeing from Mike's teams. But not being able to pick it up is slowing this game down to match the pace that the Kings like to play. They don't care too much about getting a lot of kills in the first 10 minutes. And even when there are a lot of kills in the first 10 minutes, they're usually able to control it by gold and neutral farm on the map. Right now, they're keeping it pretty much under wraps. Nobody's got a massive lead. And so little things like buff invades or variety missing a boulder, not being able to get a steal away on a camp, that's going to fluctuate this gold either way. And you're really not going to see someone truly pull ahead unless it's just in farm. And most of that right now is Dardez slightly ahead of BigManTingz, making a little bit of a difference. But now that Tingz has finished that Transcendence, I start to expect to see this Neith a little more active. And you've got to keep your eyes on the World Weavers, right? You don't care about Neith's lane phase. You care about the ults. And you can see him channeling one up. All that ever matters is if that fires, you're in the perfect spot for it to travel. Map's a little wider than in years past, so it's still going to take a little longer. But it is going to be the fastest spot that you're going to be able to hit either of the side lanes. Really help out Twig for a gank.
I think the thing that I'm most anticipating out of this Dragons roster over the course of kind of this first phase, as the year kind of progresses, Gore, is really the evolution of the core that was the Oni Warriors, but is now Jade Dragons. Because when we think back to Oni Warriors of last year, they felt it felt a lot like we were seeing. They found a meta, a game, a style that works for them, and they just stuck to that. And they never really changed much. You think the Morrigan Dodgy. That was a combo that was working so well for them in Phase 2. It worked well in Phase 3 when they ever got that one. And they saw a lot of double Hunter, things like AMC plus Vote doing whatever. But they didn't really flex out of that too much. Now with a couple of new minds on the team, as mentioned, PBM really getting to spearhead with this roster. LASBRA jumping in to add some diversity there.
Yeah.
I think that's what I'm looking forward to the most of the Dragons is how much this team diversifies over the year.
I'm going to steal a point that Mifflin made on Waiting Room yesterday, which, by the way, if you want to watch, you can go to youtube.com/SmitePro. It's the fact that when you're looking at a team's identity, a lot of the pace is typically going to be set by the jungler, by the support, right? That's your engagers most of the time. Later on, you start factoring in, I think, your solo laners, but for a majority of the game, those are who you're looking at. And those are the things that were replaced here. I think Mike and LASBRA are going to bring different perspectives to this team, and they're going to bring kind of a breath of fresh air to a core that has existed for a little while, kind of had their moments to try and get things done, but hasn't been able to find it yet.
Oh no, the pickup lands onto Nika, the World Weaver, not even necessary. It's CaptainTwig, who strikes first to the Camelot Kings. And I thought Nika was just out of range from that pickup from Variety, but he gets him right at the edge to start. And now Dardez forced out of beads. Ultimate from Genetics just off the mark, but a crash in by Jarcorrr. Dardez as good as dead. Yark, credit to the kill. CaptainTwig shows up just for the assist. And the Camelot Kings, who are down, have now put 2 on the board.
Look, you got pressure from the Dragons earlier that resulted in no kills. Pressure from the King, while it seems like a lot of ults to drop, but it results not only in kills, but maps or plays on the map immediately. And that's the thing that you've got to bear in mind, I think, with this composition, with this team in general, the way these players work. And again, to hark on to something that I think came up yesterday during Waiting Room, the Kings are a team that we have seen very constantly play methodically. Because what did they say? They said that's what wins games. That's the style we're going to play. They were very vocal about the fact that they were certain that if that meta ever shifted, they'd match whatever the meta needed in order to continue being a very dominant force. They still have that hunger after getting the championship. And I think that what we're watching is a team that is still forcing others to play their game right now. And unfortunately for the Dragons, you know, they used to be able to cause them a lot of trouble because they had 4 dudes on the team that were known for aggressive play. Now you've got a couple of people who've had a couple of years at this point that haven't been the top of the top. And I think trying to not only find their own identity, especially in spite of years past, but trying to match up specifically in this out-of-conference match against the Kings. This is one that's going to be difficult no matter what. And knowing that it might also be the only time that you face them, maybe a little extra pressure on you to try and make this one go right.
I think that last little bit's the important part. You mentioned an out-of-conference matchup or an out-of-division matchup for these guys. Is they're only going to play each other once.
This is it.
It's not like facing off against the rest of your division where you get 2 chances, maybe learn from your mistakes of the previous one, or continue to exploit the weaknesses if you end up getting the set. They got to go all out here, and the Jade Dragons want to start on the left side. Jungle do get CaptainTwig to use his ultimate to escape. And that's to set up pressure around the shield buff. They'll give that one over to Vote. Maybe some pressure for Gold Fury. We've seen one Pyromancer go down this game so far. Have not seen any real threat to the Gold Fury. Mostly this tier 1 tower. Vote should be able to walk in and take this one with just a couple more auto attacks as well as clearing out that wave. The Dragons have now set up for the Fury.
And it's smart play, right? You need to play aggressively on left, knowing the Pyromancer's down, you're minutes out from a Fire Giant. But Secure's not the greatest here, and they have to play carefully.
Dragons do get the Gold Fury, though. Costs all 3 of Dardez's bombs, plus the Typhoon from LASBRA. And why not just throw a little bit of damage out there from PBM used his. So a lot of volts expended for the Fury. But maybe the best time to do so, Gord, because Pyro's still a minute and a half out.
Yeah.
The Camelot Kings, their answer back was, we'll go ahead and take blue buff away from Nika.
Just because I think it's the most apt way to describe it. It's a very King-style play. They go get pressure over in duo, get pressure in that side of the jungle, just a little bit of poke, and then make the call. Let's rotate 4 in, get the Fury. You know that it's the only big neutral farm up, as you just mentioned. Pyromancer's gone for another, at the time, 2 minutes, now minute. So you know that you can ease your way into it. Start it up. If you get it, it's great. If you lose it, then... Or if you don't, you have to fall back, then oh well, you have something to maybe target over the next few minutes. They pick it up. They do lose their tier 1 in mid, which changes a little bit. You know, gold-wise, it's not insane of a difference, especially in comparison to what a Gold Fury gives you. But you can see it still gives the Kings a little bit of a lead, not just in gold, but also in map state. Having that Tier 1 Haven gone in mid means that suddenly the red buff, the green buff, easier to rotate into and try to go for steals if you're the Kings. And that's typically how they start to slow choke a team out, is through those smaller, you don't think about them, buff invades. And that's why it's very important to be on these rotations if you're LASBRA, very important to be around if you're Dardez to make sure that when the red is up, you're the one getting it. 15 minutes in, a single buff camp going the other way isn't the end of the world as it might be early on in the game, because that experience is going to make such a big difference. Levels 2 to 3 versus 14 to 15. But it's still, especially around the red buff or the speed buffs, the green buff, maybe not as much, but at least for the first two, they're such good power-ups to have on your side that you've got to be careful with it. And now with Pyromancer over, you can see everybody kind of rotating over. And I'm actually surprised to see that we're getting Vote involved.
Another ultimate from Mike, a swing in by Genetics. The Jade Dragons will get the Pyromancer, but the fight is not looking so great. Vote pulled back, forced into the sky to rain death from above as best he can. But Aegis on landing, he's being bullied by Variety and the rest of the Kings who have taken him down. One out for the Jade Dragons, maybe a second if Genetics can find a hook, but just off the mark from landing on a PBM. And now the Kings backing up towards Fire Giant.
Look, you get a big kill, you force a lot of relics, and you get TKOs out the wazoo. Everybody has to fall back. Nika, no, he had a full inventory and didn't even get the bomb either. And so now you're lacking a little bit of secure. This is a great call from the Kings.
Mike is being bullied away. LASBRA tries to get in, does a lot of damage to CaptainTwig. Nika gets the kill, but it's all set up by LASBRA, who's dashed out. PBM gone as well as LASBRA. Nika pops the beads to try and escape and gets the dash just in time. Double stun by Dardez is good. Variety finds the push, but Nika can dash away. Boulder just grazes the back of Nika. The Jade Dragons lose 2, but they stop the fire and take out Twig.
That's the key. So many chased that fire had to be dropped. Now you've got the respawns coming through for the Dragons, so it's not just an easy pickup for the Kings, and suddenly the game's over. But still well played. They deny, albeit unintentionally, the Runic Bomb over to the Dragons. So that's a pretty massive power-up that they're going to be missing. Something that, when it comes to sieging over the next 10 minutes, it's going to be really important if the Dragons are having to fall back. If they're on the back foot, it's just not going to be as comfortable for them in terms of getting aggressive, but also around these Fire Giants in terms of secure. We've seen it already several times this year where that Runic Bomb will get thrown out just to be, especially in a matchup like this where you don't have like that huge burst mage. It's the difference maker in a lot of those moments. Some of the pros remembering that you can kill it, but placement means everything, right? Whether or not they're focused on trying to destroy the bomb in a moment of stress, I guess, like that, is going to be up in the air. Instead, Genetics has it. No Pyromancer for another 2 minutes. Fury's up. Fight's matter.
Mike picks up Genetics, but it's only Dardez there for follow-up, and Dardez instead chose to bomb the back line. So Genetics will be able to swing away there, no problem. Vote now level 17 on this Martichoras. Has been having a fairly slow game since that first blood. You would have imagined you get first blood in dual lane, it's on a powerful pick like Marty. I guess Vote's mentality of stay back and farm rings true. Camelot Kings start at the Oni Fury. Variety stunned, picked up, thrown back, has the dash to escape. And Mike will ring the ultimate to the backline. Nika charges in, but only finds a stun onto 1. Boulder will only tap 2, but one of those 2 was Dardez. The Jade Dragons have halted the Camelot Kings, not just at fire earlier, but now at the Oni Fury as well.
Spend a lot in the process, though. Genetics still has ult. I mean, there's good engage from the Kings to make this still happen.
Genetics pulls back 2. Oni Fury low. The Kings have stolen it away. And now they will rampage forward. CaptainTwig full HP on the hop on. No blink, though, available. Dardez, Aegis quick to avoid the water hands. And now it's just Mike by himself. Yanked back by Genetics. Shoved against the wall and a killing spree for Yark. And right back to the fire for the Kings.
Yeah, and it's such an easy call. I mean, who's going to step forward? Nika maybe can really start things off, but they're going for picks. They know that the rotation has to be coming from the Dragons, and instead Variety's leading the way. Look, you force some more relics. That's Aegis down, beads down for Dardez, LASBRA, and Vote respectively. That means you've got so much wiggle room around this fight that you don't have to be too stressed about it. You've got a lot of burst damage. I'm kind of surprised to see that they're playing it as patiently as they are. I think you could go for this fire pretty succinctly and really scoop it up with ease. Pyromancer's going to be spawning, so maybe waiting, trying to pick up one a little easier, force another pick out of the Dragons before they get too aggressive too quick.
Now, one of the concerns, boy, that's brought up on the desk, early game scaling, maybe a little bit more slanted towards the Kings as far as their jungle is concerned, CaptainTwig, but late game also, maybe a bit of a concern of CaptainTwig versus LASBRA. The Habwa able to really get that magic power stacked up. LASBRA has to do a little bit of maybe extra work to get to that back line to try and take out a carry. Does this get harder for the Jade Dragons as the game goes on, knowing that there is this hyper carry style of jungle for CaptainTwig to look forward to?
Yes, I think just blanket statement, absolutely. It gets harder for them from here on out. I mean, you're already at a level deficit, right? The experience being so in favor, mainly in mid, but you can see it in the jungle, see it in support, definitely see it in solo as well. It means that you're already starting to feel that pressure getting applied to you. But then you start looking at where the gold is and specifically where the items are in the build so far. Twig, it looks like it's just a tier 1, but then add up like the power on all the items he has picked up. He is absolutely smacking people around with a build like this. And you add that into Tingz with his setup. You add in the fact that it's a little harder, I think, for LASBRA to keep this health bar as high up as you would like it when you're going up against a team that has as much damage in their composition as the Kings does. And you're really finding yourself, I think, in a struggling position, especially when something like this happens.
LASBRA, of course, used the ult against Jarcorrr.
And it did no damage.
2 ultimates thrown his way, one by Tingz and Yark using his just to close the gap. But that's Blink and ult away from LASBRA. A little bit of CDR on the build to help him out, so it won't be too long before the Typhoon comes up. But Camelot Kings playing very aggressive against the Jade Dragons.
Look, Typhoon does more damage the longer you let it charge. But even still, in a moment like that, like, it just feels so rough to have to use it strictly for the knock-up, strictly for disengage. Didn't have the beads up at the time. Now that those are back, you think maybe that enables you, and I think what you point out is really crucial. Having the CDR, getting your ult back, and getting into a position where LASBRA can feel effective is going to be really necessary for the Dragons to be able to stand up to this Fire Giant with confidence. I think Mike's still got a lot of great setup. You've got beautiful engage that Nika can provide, that Dardez can provide, but we really haven't had a loud game from either of the junglers, right? 1-1 and 4 for Twig versus 0-1 and 2 for LASBRA. But those 4 assists make a much bigger statement right now than what we're seeing out of LASBRA. And so I think now with ult coming up in the next few seconds, if they wait 40, let him get his blink online, maybe he can dive deep, but he's got to play carefully. He's got to make big plays. He might want to wait for this cloak to be finished as well, just to make sure he can get back there safely.
Mike still not hitting that level 15 power spike for the support. Genetics on the opposite side has. So unable to upgrade that starter item, and instead Mike is having to opt towards anti-crit. Because Jarcorrr already 2 crit items deep into the build.
Yep.
Maybe a little bit more as well with that fail not on the way. It's going to help out Mike and the rest of his team, but it really just feels like Mike isn't all that tanky at this point. When you look at the Kings, you've got 2 hunters who have built quite a bit of shred through him. And CaptainTwig, Mike steps up, is able to get away for a moment. Nika, maybe the only distraction that he had in order to allow Mike to make his way out of this fight.
This is that, conversation we were having earlier. I mean, Mike's got a lot of stacks on the Prophetic Cloak, but because he's not got the Thieves, right, you're lacking a little bit in terms of health, maybe struggling in aspects like that, and now you're just getting jumped on by the Kings. You have to constantly be retreating, and it's a couple of ults thrown out by the Kings, so it's so much space granted.
Fire started again by the Kings. It was leashed for a moment there, trying to take down Mike. Fire Giant low, 10% HP. The Kings will get the fire. Nika dives in and only stuns Jarcorrr. Ultimate for Genetics, not quite enough, as Nika's able to get away, and while Vote rains in damage from the sky, the Camelot Kings are alive and healthy. Fire on all 5, and the Dragons on the run.
Honestly, I just don't know if there was any other path that the Dragons were going to find into that. Their relics, I mean, almost on cooldown, constantly getting bullied out. You're looking at a team that every time they step up, we've had a really good set of retaliations from the Kings themselves. Just good re-engage, disengage from them is beautiful. It just feels like the team on the right side of the map has more control, period. And again, a lot of that is a little bit of gold going their way, a little bit of a lot of this experience difference. And so maybe something they have to be worried about. But you got to start looking, I think, at defenses here. And it's rough. I mean, you can hang out around a tier 2 if you're the Dragons. I don't think it's necessarily the end of the world. But you've got to have a very in-depth conversation about how quickly your team gets out of there. Vote has to use his ult for a disengage, and it's not even up right now. So do you send your carry up that far? I think if Vote is not feeling comfortable, and if you want to keep your relics, maybe the softest of soft defense. I'm talking like a marshmallow defense around these tier 2s. Then you can really start to hold up under the Phoenixes. Dardez should have enough clear. It's not the best, right? Flame wave, you want to be pretty much right up against the actual minion wave to make sure they stop. You're definitely not using your Path of Flames as the lane clear. You're getting rid of your disengage in that kind of circumstance. Plus, half the time you'd have to be dashing at the enemy. And so it's going to be a lot of what can Vote provide. Maybe some ults, some of the meteors there from Dardez to slow that one down. But it's a lot of pressure on them to perform. And they do have good turnaround under the Phoenixes themselves, right? LASBRA with a really good knockup, Mike with a pullback. A lot of damage that can be done in the blink of an eye. And something I think that the Kings will factor in, but have to be worried about. The problem is that the fight isn't guaranteed under the Phoenix either, right? You look at genetics, a hook, an ult, any of those going to pull someone right out of their variety as well. Can really open up opportunities under the Phoenix without even having to stand in the Phoenix themselves.
Double stun from Dardez to start the defense on the left side Phoenix. CaptainTwig waiting for a minion because he has taken a couple too many tower shots to take that one down before. Now tier 2 gone and a push up and a forced split push now between mid and left. World Weaver hits LASBRA. That does take his bubble away. He's lost at his beach. Genetics forced to swing away while Dardez continues to rain fire on the sideline of the fight. 3 versus 2 split. The Camelot Kings are the ones netting from it. Mid-Phoenix nearly down. Vote to the sky. Gets a lot of damage on the CaptainTwig. He almost took him out by himself. LASBRA will go in with the Typhoon, and that starts the fight for the Jade Dragons.
And look, I love this. Vote still playing aggressively. Nika's there to keep up some of this pressure. I don't know that they're going to have the chase down that they need. Root off the mark from Tings. You have to keep your eyes on LASBRA. No, he stops to farm. They're not going for a loop around. They're not going for any bigger plays. They burn out the Fire Giant. They don't lose the Phoenix. Come close, but they don't lose the Phoenix. And they get a massive kill, I think, at that, right? Get rid of Twig. He's still gone for 30 seconds. I doubt the Dragons are going to sit on the Fire Giant the second it respawns. But they do have a pretty nice window right before Twig, and a little after Twig respawns. That Fire Giant's not going to be under pressure from the Kings. And so maybe a little longer that they can work with. They also get a massive amount of gold that they've been lacking on, right? They're still super far behind in that department, but you're starting to see some upgrades from LASBRA into the greater purification beads. Finally finishes that bubble. And so action on the map. That's what the Dragons can start getting a little more active in. And they can do it while eating some of the CC that gets thrown their way. Problem, J-Mac, is still the team fight. I'm still worried about it. Look, I see Maui. I know what he's capable of. We saw what Genetics could do at Worlds. He just needs one play like that, and it all comes crumbling down. And the desk had mentioned it and said it in a way of, oh, well, you know, maybe you've forgotten what's happened in 4 months. But it's also been 4 months that they've been able to scrim against Maui, try to figure some things out. So maybe there's something the Dragons have cooking up that they're going to be able to defend, but as of right now, this is a team that is looking entirely at defense. If they're not even showing up for the fire, they are focused entirely on these Phoenix lines, and they feel confident in their capabilities to sit under, have that 6th man, apply a little extra pressure. I just think they have to be very careful in how they do it. Kings have to be careful in their approach, though. If Variety gets caught out here, that could be it.
Fast dash from Variety. Pulls him away from the rest of the damage of the Jade Dragons, who are unwilling to step up to not only fire, but to Pyromancer as well. Only one objective, neutral objective at least, still standing up. Mid-Phoenix took a lot of a beating earlier on. Got it to about 25% HP. It's been able to regen for a little while. So weakened Phoenix in the mid to defend 2v2. Meanwhile, 3v3 on the right side with Mike bouncing between. Even Jarcorrr with that global presence able to go through. But you're talking about the defense of the Jade Dragons. How Dardez has a lot of range potential. Vote as well in this Marty, keeping him out with that acid rain.
And honestly, I love the poke. Vote still has to be careful, right? Engage ult, really lots of damage. We saw him do it last time. Then he loses a disengage. Has to play carefully. Has to rely a little bit, I think, on Nika, LASBRA. Maybe opening some doors. Genetics has Tingz right behind him, which honestly I think changes a little bit of how this is going to go. That's an ult from Tingz as well. I don't know if that's going to work out for him.
Well, instantly, the Camelot Kings back themselves away once that ultimate comes up empty-handed, at least against the Jade Dragons. Not sure who that ultimate even hit during that time. If it was Nika or maybe PBM was able to soak that one up. It'll be a reset for the Jade Dragons and for the Camelot Kings. They got the fire early on. They had the Pyromancer. Runic Bomb still in CaptainTwig's pocket. But back to the Primal Fury, at least for now. At least to me, Gore, that tells me the Camelot Kings are done sieging. They're done trying to fight up with the Phoenixes. Instead, are getting set up for the next fire.
Yeah, honestly, it's the timer changes, right? Fire Giant, for those of you unaware, used to be 5 minutes, now 4 minutes for the respawn. The buff was 4 minutes at the beginning of the season, but it has since changed to 3 minutes. And it's so difficult. I mean, look, in a composition like this, when you're going up against the Dragons, a team that you know all it'll take is one big team fight to start shifting tides right back into their favor. It's a lot harder to make that 3 minutes work for you than it was the 4 minutes you had prior to this most recent update. So I think having to just play with the time they have, you had mentioned it, only one Runic Bomb as well, so it's a lot more difficult to just go in, nuke the Phoenix the way that we've seen a couple of these teams doing. With the next Fire Giant comes the next Pyromancer, though, so if you've got one, theoretically you get the other. It does give this opportunity. I mean, you know, we were talking about it earlier. You had mentioned pressure that the Dragons need to feel going into late game. I had talked a lot about experience. None of that matters anymore. The only person who's not 20 yet is Mike. You have to imagine that's going to be ticking over relatively soon, and it's honestly not even that crazy important for him to be able to tick over to 20 as it is, you know, your junglers, etc. So you find yourself in a better position. Last time they didn't contest the FG. Didn't even bother. Now it's EFG. You can see them stepping up. They've got their stealth grass already laid out on the map, and they've got a lot more items to back up, giving them that extra power that prior to this they were really missing. So I'm looking for the Dragons to make a really big engage, and I think it's going to come off Mike.
Mike tries to start. Unfortunately, Genetics a little bit faster on getting that swing through. A bit of a wind-up for Mike's grab. Not as easy to land, at least in the late game. Nika eats a pretty hefty amount of poke from BMT, but some dish right back to him. But look at Jarcorrr.
Yep.
Over on the left side of the map. We'll start at the shield buff. Jade Dragons, I'm not sure if they recognize that Yark hasn't appeared on that side of the map, but now seeing him on a wave should at least tell the Jade Dragons where they are, but being Jarcorrr and being a Chernobog, can get right back to the fight.
It's the Chernobog part that's really the most menacing. Pyromancer? Look, this is something I'm impressed with the Dragons stepping up to this, trying to force the fight, get something going, but it's incredibly dangerous to lose. I mean, look at Vote's health bar.
Wow, and Dardez gone in an instant. CaptainTwig erases him off the map. 2, 2, and 4 now for the Hubwa jungle. The Sunders from Genetics in those tight corridors start things up. And immediately now Jarcorrr will join his team on the right side of the map. Fire Giant on all 5 of the Camelot Kings. Dardez down for 40 seconds, and a second Runic Bomb in pocket for the Camelot Kings as they can make their march down the lanes.
And I just want to throw it out there. The Kings got that kill, and they were laughing. I saw Genetics and Variety both just time of their life. They seem to be happier than happy. Now you've got an EFG, so backdoor protections don't even matter. You got 2 Runic Bombs. One of these Phoenixes is going to die, guaranteed. It's just how many more they can get after that that's going to make a difference.
Maui ult off the mark by Genetics. Phoenix still at a 3rd HP. Runic Bomb hits. Typhoon goes through 3 in the back line. The Phoenix is still alive. Another Boulder from Variety and one more auto will take down the bird. The Camelot Kings, they take a lot of damage. They dish a bit back out. But at the end of the day, the Phoenix was their end call.
Only used one of the Runic Bombs. And so with a couple minutes left on their power play, definitely in a spot where they can rotate back in. I actually love this. You're going to back up. Oni Fury's coming up, so now you're going to then spawn Oni Fire minions in mid if you pick this one up. And it gives you the opportunity, get that last little bit of farm. You're looking at upgrades towards relics at this point, maybe some power pots. Turn around, rush back in, go for the siege. With a small opening, you're going to be able to get a Phoenix with this kind of build, this kind of draft. You still have 2 hunters. Tings and Jarcorrr in one lane together. The Runic Bomb and an EFG? Yeah, it should be a second Phoenix pretty easily guaranteed. It's the damage in return. It's going to cause a little bit of trouble. That pick onto Dardez opened up a lot of room for the Kings. He didn't use either of his relics at the time, so they're both still up. Admittedly, both still base, so it's not necessarily going to be a, hey, he can hit beads, rejoin the fight, and not have to wait as much longer. Still some pressure onto Dardez, onto Vote, to make sure that their relics get the maximum usage that they possibly can.
A collapse point possible for CaptainTwig through the mid. Fire Oni minions now pushing up the wave. Dardez tries to get a little bit of damage out as Mike started that fight up. With another pick towards the tanks. Underused. Ultimate for Genetics only will connect with Mike. Nika steps forward. He'll be able to walk away. Genetics swings to the backline. Boulder slams into 2. And the left side bird will fall to the Camelot Kings. Variety PBM pushed back and knocked away by Jarcorrr. Now Dardez and Nika on the run. A triple typhoon from LASBRA will slow down the Camelot Kings. It's 5 versus 4, but the Kings unwilling to push it to the throne room just yet.
It's also almost 20,000 gold right now separating them. I mean, you know, you talk about it, we're 36 minutes in. I said that the Kings like to slowly choke out their opponents. That's exactly what they've been doing. And it feels like there's not a lot of opportunity here for the Dragons to really make their stand, especially knowing the kind of minions that are going to be pouring down. They've got 2 waves of fire minions. Your power play disappears. But man, what a power play it was, right? A minute left to reset. If you think the Dragons are going to be able to step up, like, you know, Guan Yu has okay clear, so maybe you can leave Nika to deal with one of these lanes. But that only accounts for 1 teleport, 1 person to re-engage in the fight. This next FG, if you're the Dragons, it probably doesn't even exist. Alternatively, this next FG, if you're the Dragons, might be the only way back into this, right? Do you go for a Hail Mary? Do you try to make something happen and risk literally everything on the one fighter? Do you hold back, hope for the best onto the base? Honestly, I always love the riskier decisions, so I know that I err on one side versus the other. I wouldn't be surprised, though, if they do not leave this line of scrimmage that is just at the Phoenix line at this point. I mean, the 90% of this map is King's territory, and so you've got to respect that if you're the Dragons. This Fire Giant should be a pretty easy scoop up. If they get some of the waves a little further out, they might be able to send someone over to scout, but with the speed that this should go down, they are on defense, defense, defense. You're looking at ults, you're looking at relics, they're feeling good on both accounts. And then you're stressing about the fact that the Kings could quite literally just walk in and decide to damage dump the Titan, and all of your defense itself doesn't necessarily matter. 3 waves of fire minions. Difficult to deal with, but you know where checkbox number 1 is going to be, and that's in mid, considering it's respawning soon.
Jade Dragons, you need your defense maybe right here and right now. Mid Phoenix respawns to get a breath of fresh air before submerging into the earth once more, into the ashes. Jade Dragons will hold inside their Titan room. All 5 of the Kings spread around that mid Phoenix. Variety and Genetics at the front line. CaptainTwig the furthest back out of everybody on the Kings. Variety wants to find that pickup. He's fishing for a single target to grab, but he can't get any one of them. And it's CaptainTwig who's eating a lot of damage. Nika out to the back line. Doesn't find the stun he was looking for. Instead, it is a turn and burn. Jarcorrr up in the sky, down on the ground, fighting against LASBRA, but just misses the auto that he needs to turn it around.
Maui goes for the pull, not able to get it, but this is still a good siege for the Kings.
Variety gets pushed back a little bit. PolarBearMike has stepped too far forward, and LASBRA killed inside the throne room. The Camelot Kings have taken out 2, maybe a third. Vote use the agent preemptively, but it's only demise for the Jade Dragons, the Camelot Kings. A slow game but a dominant one as they take game one.
And that is exactly how I would describe it. I mean, quite literally, at like 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes, if you want to give them a little more wiggle room, the Kings put the dragon in a chokehold, and then they just held them there for another 30 minutes. And again, it's that pressure. It's so much in the neutral territory. We see it really mount up around, I think, that first Pyromancer opens up a lot of conversation. You do get some retaliation back, right? The Dragons, for the most part, keeping pace in terms of gold, neutral farm, because they get that Fury right afterward. But they just didn't have the presence in the fights after that, right? We didn't get to see as much from them. It felt like they were always just a little bit too late. Vote did some decent damage, but it was always, okay, we got one, they got one back, and their one was a little bit more important or a little stronger. They got all our relics, and now we can't fight the most important fight. And so it feels like they were constantly being forced into these decisions, the Kings making the Dragons play their game, and they just did it so cleanly that, admittedly, well, it still took them a little while to break the base because of good defenses from the Dragons. They got where they needed, and they win that game.
And it's something that we always talk about going against the Kings is you want to try and force the Kings to play your game, but almost inevitably, the Kings always end up dragging you into their core. The Kings do just that in game number one. They start off this set with a 1-0 lead. Can they keep it going? We'll find out in game two, right after this.
Hold up, wait a second. I need to know your title. Turn around, I need a minute. Are you anybody's wife yet? Keep holding my breath since the day you left. Can't get no rest. No, no. Deleted all your photos, but they're still burning inside my mind. Threw away all your clothes cause I didn't want anything left to remind me of us. Keep holding my breath since the day you left. Can't get no rest. No, no. Make a wish and take one last breath as I'm diving deep. My head is underwater. I thought I didn't need you, but while I'm drowning slowly, I realize that I've been missing you like crazy. My head is underwater, 'cause I thought I didn't need you. My lungs are wide open now, 'cause I realize I've been missing you like crazy. Sometimes when I meet you, I don't know what to say, no. So I try to read ya. I watch every move that you're making. You're stuck on my brain. I'm going insane, crying the rain. No, no. But deep down I know that you were just an obsession. Because if I play, I'll move it to the end. There's no question. You're stuck on my brain. I'm going insane, numb by the pain. No, no. Make a wish and take one last breath as I'm diving deep. My head is underwater. I thought I didn't need you, but while I'm drowning slowly, I realize that I've been missing you like crazy. My head is underwater, 'cause I thought I didn't need you. My lungs are out of air now, 'cause I realize I've been missing you like crazy. Missing you. I can't get nowhere,
I know it's been a while, haven't talked since July. You've been on my mind, don't hang up. I know it's been some time since I called you mine. You've been on my mind. Don't hang up. Maybe I'm a little bit jealous. Haven't told my friends we ended it. Yeah, I know that it's wrong. Maybe it's a little bit selfish calling you up when I'm wasted, when I know that you moved on. Is she in your arms right now? Tell me, is she gonna stay the night? Tell me, is she in your arms right now? Is she in your arms tonight? Like I used to be. Like I used to be. Can't get over you. Just wanna talk things through. Tell me what to do. Don't give up. After all that we've been through, I give my all to you. Just tell me what to do. Don't give up on me yet. Maybe I'm a little bit jealous. Haven't told my friends we ended it. Yeah, I know that it's wrong. Maybe it's a little bit selfish calling you up when I'm wasted, when I know that you moved on. Is she in your arms right now? Tell me, is she gonna stay the night? Tell me, is she in your arms right now? Is she in your arms tonight? Like I used to be.
The defending world champions strike first blood in their first best of 3 of the year here in Season 10 of the SMITE Pro League. And they did it in fashion, not only on the battleground, but in their player booth as well. You notice the gold and black jerseys that the defending world champs get. And you also may have noticed with the other few teams we've had in studio today, their brand new jerseys for Season 10 of the SMITE Pro League. You can get your hands on the jerseys right now at shop.hi-rezstudios.com/SPL. Of course, brought to you by our friends over at Skulls. We've got some great new brands in the SPL this year. We've got redesigns of the existing brands as well. It's a great time to get in and show your fandom. If you're a Ravens fan, you might be in store for a pretty good year this year if this morning is any indicator. Kings, Dragons fighting it out here. And thanks again to Skulls for bringing us all the awesome merchandise that our players are wearing and you at home can grab as well. Myth, game number 1. I would say longer, on the long end of average, right, from traditional SMITE SPL sets. But for a Camelot Kings set, this feels right at home for them. Felt calculated once they got their feet underneath themselves. And from there, ballooned out to 20 or so thousand gold ahead and close out the game.
Yeah, they figured it out a lot faster than I thought they would. That was as standard as it becomes for the Camelot Kings. It was methodical team fight, methodical 5-on-5 engagement, played throughout the early game at their own pace. It felt like at times the Jade Dragons were a bit over-eager to force some fights. The Camelot Kings, of course, always ready to be defensive if they need to, and they were. Specifically, I believe it was like 17, 16 or so minutes, maybe it was around here, where the Jade Dragons had pulled the Fire Giant. They're actually playing at about,
There you go.
like, what, 1,000 gold deficit maybe, or a couple hundred. But this is where the game really starts to open up for the Camelot Kings. I believe they get 3 or 4 unanswered. And from there, the Kings had a firm grasp on the game, just slowly pulling themselves further and further ahead. The Jade Dragons never quite found their footing after that point. I thought the Camelot Kings would struggle in a meta that is as transient as this one, that is still in the works, still being developed, but I forgot that they were the ones that developed the meta in the last one. So I suppose, you know, if you can't find your home, you don't know where it is, you just build a new one.
Build one wherever you are. Yeah, I mean, the kill total from that fight you shouted out at 16 or 17 minutes, maybe went up by 1. in the next 10 or 15 minutes of the game. It's where the Kings were able to pump the brakes, but also fuel up the tank in the gold department, knocking down towers, finding objectives, free farm on the map in moments where the Jade Dragons weren't necessarily able to fight back. It was a composition, really, Miff. It feels like built by individual pieces that the Jade Dragons themselves like playing as players, but couldn't quite find that full-on identity, just fell a bit too far behind. I saw a bit of criticism online towards the Atlas pick in general. I'm not sure that it saw the return Mike was certainly looking for necessarily looking for in game number 1. And with such value elsewhere on the map, I wonder if that's something the Jade Dragons end up looking to address here. But it's just such a difficult team, isn't it, the Camelot Kings, to counter pick and ban against now. You have a game 1 that goes that way. It just feels like a team that always has the ability to play that style of game with an entirely different composition of 5.
Yeah, and I think the concerns around the Atlas a bit fair for the Jade Dragons as well, but not because Atlas is weak. I'm not going to say that. I think Atlas still is a very strong
Literally
guardian.
lifts the world.
Literally lifts the world. I mean, setting world records, PR bench every single day, whatever. I don't go to the gym. But
No, you're on it.
the Atlas struggles because of the Hebo pick on the other side. Every single time that ultimate was channeled, he'd connect with 3-4 targets. He'd toss out a slow, and the Hebo would say, okay, well, what if we just didn't fight while our defenses have been stripped away? Or what if we just didn't play in this slow? Throws out Atlas the Yellow River, that massive water carpet, and the entire team is ferried away. So the Atlas perhaps would see some success if they could deal with the Camelot Kings Hebo selection first, and the Jade Dragons have done so well.
Yep. Hebo, Hercules, those were important, if not the most important, parts of the Camelot Kings draft for game 1. Again, though, with the Kings, it feels like they can say, all right, well, we're not going to do it with a Herc Hebo comp. We're going to do it with one of the other 90 comps that we've already figured out as far as the meta goes. And this is just going off history. I mean, who knows what's going to happen long term here in Season 10. One thing we do know, Jade Dragons not worried about the result from Marty in Game 1. Sitting at 100% pick ban rate across 3 games so far. Did not win Game 1 here for the Jade Dragons, but a team not feeling like Marty was the issue. Did see big damage numbers. In fact, maybe top in the game by the end. Was hanging in there, if not ending the game at top damage. So Martichoras, not the issue according to the Jade Dragons.
I think Martichoras likely a mainstay in the meta until some of those numbers get adjusted, because the late game damage output, just ridiculous. The early game pressure in lane, also incredibly high. Has the flexibility to go between either mid or the hunter role, so you're not even revealing too much with your draft, taking him first overall. The only thing you know is that there's going to be a hunter for the Jade Dragons, at least the one of them. So I think a very strong first pick overall. The Dragons, as well as dealing with the Hebo in the bans, also take away that Hercules, which I think was a massive key for the Camelot Kings in the previous game. I believe top of the damage charts, hovering around 30,000, goes undying, and was starting off the majority of the fights as well. The Camelot Kings have to look a bit further for their initiators. Vamana, not exactly that pick, though, is not your initiator. Likely for the jungle. We've seen him out of solo as well, but I'm not certain that it's within Variety's God pool.
Teams, even early in the draft here, thinking long and hard about the picks that they want to lock in. Vamana Ram ends up being the answer. Vamana did not see value for adapting in the first set of the day today. At moments maybe did. You know, with the full crit build, was able to simply walk into the back line and find a kill or two, but was ignored on a couple of occasions. Camelot Kings hoping that is not the case. The Jade Dragons have a variety of opportunities here. I think I start to think about the Dardez pick. Hera obviously hits Dardez a bit. Aphrodite hits Dardez and Mike a bit. Agni wasn't quite it for the Dragons in game 1, and if they're thinking about what is going to connect now, the world at their feet. Still plenty of viability here, and the Camelot Kings clearly throwing the Dragons for a bit of a loop in their second game.
I think both have just taken their time. These are our two teams that love to theorize and strategize. Love that we got Dardez on cam there. Seems like he's lost a bit of weight, if you ask me.
Yeah. Such a presence, though. You know, when you see Dardez sitting there like that, it really just controls a room.
Something about how he's capable of remaining so still, I think is what's telling. Maybe
He's
even
mastered
psychotic.
the ability of standing so incredibly still that he becomes imperceptible to the human eye. And that's what Dardez is doing right. Do you know what that's from?
Is that Jurassic Park?
Oh my god, no. Serqet and Hell are the picks for the Jade
A
Dragons.
Velociraptor?
You're almost there. Serqet and Hell, the 2 picks for the Jade Dragons after a bit of deliberation. Remember, Serqet received some changes.
Oh, the mid head-to-head, that's big.
That is big. And it is important. And they're hanging in there. Serqet and Hell, though, Miff. What do you think of the 2 that the Jade Dragons ultimately end up settling on?
You could have given me the entire time to run through every single bit of the Smite God catalog, and I would not have landed on these 2 for the Jade Dragons there. Hell maybe in the conversation, and I know LASBRA likes the Serqet, but if we're going off of every bit of competitive Smite played up until this point in the year 2023, these are 2 picks that have either been locked in and have not succeeded or just have not been locked in.
Into Mike Hell?
I would have to hazard a guess, right? I would have to. Because Dardez does not like the Hell pick,
Well, let's
but
see,
Mike hasn't. Has Mike won on the Hell yet this year? I don't think so. This is his 3rd lock-in.
Well, let's see if we can read Dardez's face. I want to see if what
Get
Dardez is
Dardez back
showing
on the screen,
us,
please.
maybe it'll let us know exactly what's on the mind. Mike did play Hell at the kickoff tournament with 3, 7, and 9. So it was not the best Hell game from PolarBearMike, but we do know that Mike loves his mage supports. Baba Yaga seen some value already here today, but it won't be Surtur or Agni for Dardez or Nika. Flip the order of those 2, I would say, respectively. Sylvanus, a bit unique from the supports that we expected to see, but genetics, I think at this point, Miff has proven that he can make just about anything work.
Genetics very used to having upwards of 7 bans tossed his way, 5 from the enemy and 2 just peripheral support bans from his own team. So Sylvanus perhaps not in the top of his priority list, but certainly, you know, his 8th or 9th best pick, which is not so much worse than his first because Genetics' God Pool is absolutely ridiculous. Will give over a bit of sustain to his team, strong initiation, the ability to pull through wall, I think, going to be very significant. But it's the form of CC that he has that I think is going to be difficult to deal with for this Hell. You need that cleanse for these large AoE abilities, these telegraphed CCs. The pull from Sylvanus, pretty hard to lock down. I'm not sure you're going to cleanse really any of those.
Healing and anti-heal, the name of the game for the Jade Dragons here, Miff. Guan Yu with an Outpost just before it, Hell. Before those 2, Serqet. Before those 3. And then, yeah, I guess Martichoras, number 1. The Hades to finish off the draft for the Kings. What's your read here, Miff? Jade Dragons, the mindset obviously limiting a bit of what Sylvanus and Hades and Vamana can do. Hell maybe supplying the rest of the team. How's this comp going to work for the Dragons?
Early game standard composition for the most part. I think you've got good poke potential, decent burst ability, playmaker out of the jungle that can bring CC on her own and start up the fight. In the late game on the 5-on-5, I could imagine this Jade Dragons draft, well, essentially just running into a wall, which is how do we secure our kills? If Serqet wants to be involved in that front line against the wall of damage that the Camelot Kings have brought, she'll likely have to itemize a bit towards defense and utility. If that's the case, you just lost a massive part of your burst. Your initiation is entirely reliant on Guan Yu. Cavalry charge better be hitting 4 people and getting at least 3 beads, because otherwise, who's doing it? It's Serqet, right? And her CC is not so reliable, I think, that you can really have her be the only other initiator for your team. So a pick composition for the Jade Dragons that should succeed for the first 20-some-odd minutes. But once it's grouped up 5-on-5, I can see the Camelot Kings really running away with it with a much more standard comp.
And if we know anything about the Camelot Kings,
oh, they love that.
They want to group up and fight 5v5. And
I wouldn't be surprised if they just said verbatim what I did. Like, guys, just get to 20, and these guys are done.
You're giving yourself a lot of credit there, Miff.
No, I'm like a parrot, and I hear them say it, and then I come here and I present it as if it were an original thought of my own.
They said it first.
Well,
are you saying they repeated what you just said, or you repeated what they just said?
Well, you know, you don't have to pull back the veil that much, Dave. You can like.
Well, you said you're a parrot and you repeat things.
Okay.
So the Camelot Kings, I mean, you think they have the ability to pump the brakes, though? Is this a team that just gets obliterated early on if the Dragons force those fights? Do they have the opportunity, the Camelot Kings, to say, no, I don't want to fight until 20, 25 minutes.
Once you've already fallen behind, the ability to pump the brakes is eviscerated. So if the Jade Dragons get a 2,000 some odd lead 10 minutes in, it's on them to be able to just continually aggress and get onto these objectives, force team fights there. If the Camelot Kings can prevent that from happening, and I think they are capable, just by simply utilizing their own sustain or the safety of their composition throughout the early. A lot of these guys are very difficult to lock down. Ram, remove yourself from the play field. Vamana, very survivable. Hades, self-sustain, and the team-wide sustain from the Sylvanus. So, can they pump the brakes early? Yes. But the Jade Dragons might be able to barrel over them as well.
Let's find out. Camelot Kings, Jade Dragons, game number 2 starts right now.
That's right. We jump into game number 2 with the Jade Dragons and the Camelot Kings in our second set of the day. It's J-Mac, Gore, and Doug here to bring you the action for that second game. And the Jade Dragons deviating a little bit in their composition, Gore. Last time around, it was a very hefty frontliner for PBM. LASBRA with the get to the backline style of God. Dardez able to rain some damage from pretty far range now.
Yeah.
Getting a little bit more in your face this time around. PBM going on this hell. Not really the big frontliner right in your face that you would expect. Instead, a little bit more of that backline style of support.
I'm really anxious, I guess is the word for it, to see how this works. Excited is maybe a better, like, more happy term. I just don't know, you know, whether or not it's going to be this huge pop-out play, or if it's maybe going to struggle a little bit. David mentioned it, like a lot of healing that just exists in this match, and some anti-heal from the Dragons as well. I want to see what their pressure is like in lane, right? Genetics, specifically Sylvanus, known for really helping things out since his autos hit multiple minions at the same time. And you can see something similar, Jarcorrr having a little bit better clear overall, but I don't know, it feels like it could be a little bit more of a balancing act between the two. I think PBM's got my attention, along with LASBRA. You had highlighted him on the Serqet super early on. I just don't know that you've got a lot of easy targets at the early game that are going to make a huge difference. Meanwhile, on the other side, this Vamana we've seen, if you watched earlier, can be pretty dominant, even though it lost that game that Adapting played it. Looked really good for 45 of the 53 minutes the game went on. I don't know, man. It's really... I don't even want to use the term eye-opening. I think it's just going to be quite a revelation to see how this hell scales, right, with all the healing changes that happen to her. What it looks like in a pro match as compared to what you might have seen in ranked or seen in casuals. I think Mike is going to provide something that will dictate whether or not this is a pick that needs to be worried about in the nearby future, or if it's going to fall off the face of the earth after a couple of bad performances.
We did see Mike pot the hell a little bit during the kickoff tournament.
Yeah.
Had mixed performance on it. I think a 1-1 if I remember correctly. So to be determined how much of a threat this hell is going to be, as you say, maybe as this match continues to go on, if maybe more priority needs to be thrown towards picks and bans in later sets, or maybe just compositions in general to try and deal with the God. Still at least decent clear for Mike and Vote to match that of Genetics and Jarcorrr. Typically when you see those Sylvanus, you almost kind of forego trying to fight into the clear, because typically they have some of the better clear, but...
God help you if you get up against a Sylvanus and an Ishtar.
Jarcorrr, though, rooted in place, will take some damage from the Acid Rain, which has been that primary clear tool for both, and such a great poke tool as well. Even going back to some of the Phoenix defenses that we saw at the Jade Dragons, oftentimes it was Vote who was relegated to healing for his team just because of how much range you get from that ability.
Yeah, honestly, I think that this is going to be... It's so interesting because I feel like it's a very aggressive duo lane in terms of lane pressure and like minion pressure. But in team fights, especially if you're not going to hit all of your damage, kind of falls flat on its face. I don't think either of the carries are going to be swinging too hard. Maybe a little extra from Vote early on because more abilities as opposed to just the autos from Jarcorrr, but I think both of the supports are going to keep their carry topped off. They're going to provide just enough support in terms of clearing out the waves. And so it comes out more or less as a net wash and really creates a conversation, I think, more around how you can start to pull ahead, where the junglers are going to be. Vamana, really good knock-up, really good close gap, Not necessarily the most surprising gank in the world, though, right? Very telegraphed, doesn't have a leap. Blink is going to be a necessity, and you can see CaptainTwig has it. But how often are you going to be able to get that real surprise factor out there, I think, is the question mark for him. On the other side, Serqet, known for mobility, really good at locking people down, anti-heal that is available, as well as displacement that comes off of that. You grab someone, especially early on, like a Sylvanus, that's pretty much a no-go. No disengage. That's going to be easy for Genetics to try and get out of there. And so it could be an easy gank for LASBRA. Maybe not the best target in the world, but a kill's a kill, and sometimes that's what you're looking for.
One thing Des brings up was maybe a battle of anti-heal versus sustain, or I guess healing as well. For these two compositions, Jade Dragons, I mean, you get Vote, LASBRA, Dardez, all with some anti-heal in the kit. And then your sustain with Mike and Nika versus opposite side for the Kings. It's a lot of, well, just sustain over there between Variety and Genetics. Variety's going to need some of that sustain, or maybe just a good set of beads to get away from LASBRA. Now there's a target on Variety's head at least, but as the game maybe goes a little bit further down the road, Gore, once you start getting into some of these mid, maybe late game team fights, how does that factor of the anti-heal versus the necessity of sustain kind of fare for both these squads?
I feel like it's the nature of their sustain and something that you're going to struggle with. I think LASBRA's going to have to deal with a good gank onto Variety, knowing that there's no beads, but instead it's Twig getting aggressive. And this is what I mean when I say the forms of sustain. It's an HP shield now for Vamana, right? Not just HP. So all of a sudden the anti-heal isn't making that big of a difference to him versus maybe some of the others. Genetics, I think Variety having some self-heal, right? Everybody being able to kind of keep themselves going, but a little more diversified. The real downside is what you had mentioned, which is that you've got a few people on the Dragons that do have anti-heal cooked in. You're going to need to build it for most of the Kings to make that big difference. You can see a Tainted Steel picked up from Variety up front. Good news is that right now, Divine Ruin's not a bad item to be picking up, and so maybe it gets even extra because of the fact that it is going to be helpful here. But they're going to need something. Wouldn't be surprised if maybe there's a little bit of an onk, probably on both sides a little later. But definitely something for the Kings. And the one thing that Mifflin and Dave had talked about on the desk, one of the things that they were really highlighting was early game pressure for the Dragons that could really start to ramp things up. I think if they keep it at this pace where you're seeing some fight but not really getting to that explosive start that we're used to seeing from a Dragons composition, from a team that it has Mike on it, then you're just going to enter a late game state where I think the Kings are going to be more than happy to take a lot of these fights.
Yeah, that was definitely maybe a danger point for the Jade Dragons, is maybe having to be that team that has the onus to really get this game kicked off in the first 15 to 20 minutes or so. Because like we saw from Game 1, Gore, the Camelot Kings, sure, they went down for a first blood, but Jade Dragons never really pushed that lead anywhere. They never got any objectives off it, any other kills following up. So the Kings got that time to build back up, gain that slow momentum, and they're doing so even right now. I mean, nothing has happened on the map. Literally no kills have gone through, and we're already at 1,500 up for the Camelot Kings.
Man, this is what they were so good at last year. And honestly, there's no reason to change it because, and this goes back to an interview I think Mike had when we were talking about invades. He said, it's still SMITE, right? Like, there were so many changes that came into this year, but at that base, it's still SMITE. And so what are they doing? They're playing neutral farm a little better. They're willing to invade a little more often, but they're making sure to control a lot of these camps. That shield buff going the way of the Dragons is actually a huge deal in a moment like this, because otherwise you're slowly but surely amassing a really gnarly lead for 7 minutes. I mean, you're 1,500 gold spread out across everybody. Yeah, it's only 300 gold per, but suddenly you're going to be looking at getting a tier 1 a little bit quicker. You're hitting your power spikes a little faster. So I think something the Dragons, I mean, you have to quell it. You have to get on it as quick as you possibly can. And that means being willing to contest some mid-camps. The problem is that Baba Yaga has decent disengage, good damage early on. Vamana, good damage early on, good engage. Whereas Puch struggles a little early on because he doesn't have a lot of mobility. And you've got a Hell as well for your support, so maybe not as tanky, not as immediate engagey outside of the Serqet in your 3v3. And I think that's going to help the Kings out, especially in the next few minutes.
LASBRA finds a big taunt. This could be a big first blood for the Jade Dragons. Genetics separates himself from BMT. And the Dragons are able to strike first on the map. What will the follow-up be? Gold Fury was teased for a moment by the Kings, dropped immediately. The Jade Dragons, for a moment, thought maybe they would head towards that way, try and start it up, but it could be a pick onto Jarcorrr as well. Fast roll away. LASBRA goes in with the dive, but no taunt to be had. It'll just be a first blood for the Dragons.
Yeah, and that could have been another win if they got the beads at minimum, right? Whether or not they get the kill from Jarcorrr, kind of up in the air. First blood on Genetics goes to your jungler. So already, I think feeling pretty confident in that. But it just chips away a little bit at that lead that the Kings had already amassed. And the real problem I'm seeing, again, is a kill on the Genetics, but it doesn't increase the pace of the game that much. It's not like they were able to make a massive pull afterward. No Gold Fury. Pyromancer's not even down yet, so you're not able to start up even stacking something like a Runic Bomb. And so if you're the Dragons here, it's just establishing pace, trying to make what just happened more consistent for yourselves. Make sure that it can continue going. I think that LASBRA has a really good pressure point over here on Variety, but when the beads are up, you still have to be stressed about whether or not you can make this Hades do anything, and I think the longer things go on, I mean, we talk about Pillar of Agni, the procs you get during that. Add a couple more items, suddenly Variety is going to be a much more difficult target. And so more than anything, I'm kind of hoping to see LASBRA a little more around the map in terms of action from what we'll get from him.
Genetics tries to sneakily steal away the speed buff they got leashed. For a moment, maybe thought he'd stepped a little too far forward, but he's got backup from CaptainTwig, now level 10 on the Vamana. So even with the first blood bounty going to LASBRA, still falling behind in the farm department to CaptainTwig. Attempted pick up against Voe, but he'll immediately jump to the sky and rain some damage right back at the Camelot Kings. Mike steps up to try and stop the shield buff. That one does go the way of the Kings, but now LASBRA is here. Taunt on Genetics. He'll throw him back again. And Genetics has been here before. He will run as fast as he can. He's able to get away this time as nobody from the Dragons committed their damage to it, and now it's Mike left hung out to dry. And the Camelot Kings will strike back with their first kill.
I think it's just a good set of reads from the Kings, right? Get pressure onto Vote, force the ult. Immediately they're able to force the beads. That gets your Hunter out of there if you're the Dragons. And unfortunately, you just don't have enough follow-up afterward. LASBRA has to go in deep, but has no beads to survive CC. So they just get the kill.
Vote and Dardez team up to take down one at the Fury. Should be two.
Yeah.
Up against Genetics. He's running. LASBRA on the way. It'll be 2 kills now for the Jade Dragons. A double on top for Dardez, but a Fury for the Camelot Kings. A trade. The Jade Dragons maybe not happy to take, but definitely happy to get something back.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, you need something going your way. Look, the kills, it doesn't matter if it reads 3-1. The way the farm has been going for the Kings has just been cleaner, and you can see it really manifesting a lot, and specifically in mid, a little bit you had mentioned earlier in the jungle. And so picking up a couple of kills, turning that into a Pyromancer, taking some of the lead away from the Kings, and getting yourself back, boots on the ground, into the game. It's going to be good to try and dig your heels in, push back. You're really starting to see, I think, what Dardez can offer to this on the Op Wash. I know, at least coming into this year, when I first saw Op Wash, kind of like the Anubis, I was like, oh my god, what have we done? What kind of changes have happened? And a lot of it is because of those Empty the Crypts, right? A big no-play zone, good damage. Even though it doesn't secure the objective there and maybe turn things around, it does keep pressure on the Kings and open up a conversation for the Dragons that otherwise would literally never have been there. And so I think if we get to see more of crypts getting emptied in that nature, Dardez is going to be really good around these team fights, good around objectives. Probably not going to need to see it for another few minutes anyway, because no Fury for 2.5, no Pyro for 3. It's not like they're going to be hard-pressed for a team fight. So play it a little slower, be fine. You're going to have some good late-game damage. If you're the Kings, you just need to kind of right the ship that otherwise has been falling apart a little bit.
Variety dives in, gets the beads and ult off of Dardez. Now it's PBM being chased out. The firebolts from the house, not enough damage to take down PBM, but all 5 of the Camelot Kings has searched the left side of the map. There's not even an objective to fight over here. Variety's just rotated, maybe just for the sake of fighting at this point. He'll rejoin the rest of his team, but Camelot Kings, maybe a bit of an awkward aggression from them.
It really is the nothing to fight over part that has me not scratching my head, because you get a couple kills, then all of a sudden you maybe get a big shot down. A 2-0 bounty that's picked up right now onto Dardez. Not the most gold in the world, but a bounty's a bounty. And you're also looking for mid pressure because you're losing a ton of it right here. I mean, that should be a pretty easy tier 1 if they want to go for it. And if they're not going to get it right here, they're probably going to get it in the next few minutes. If you're the Dragons, right? Pressure on the map goes well for them. Good lane clear as well. I think Variety at this point is really just trying to figure out how to get in on this game and get into an impact position a little faster than what maybe Nika will be able to provide, and definitely a little larger than what Nika can provide.
LASBRA chased out. Fortunately, it is a Serqet, one of the most mobile assassins in the game. He uses both of his escapes to, well, get away from Variety as fast as he can. Otherwise, ult was waiting for him. Nika now dashed as far as he can. Will be hit by the Hades combo. Will be just fine, so we'll fight a little bit back as well. Had a lot of fighting across the map so far, Gore. Most of it unsuccessful in really getting anything. A couple of kills for the Jade Dragons, now 3 up for them. 2,000 gold. Not even really between the two squads at this point. Is this a pumps the brake enough pacing for the Camelot Kings to set themselves up for success towards the late game?
Oh, for sure. I mean, well, we're 14 minutes in. You're just about to get to the point where you can fight again. 13 seconds till the Fury spawns up. And so I'm expecting some electricity here around the 15-minute mark. But you've waited. I mean, you've lasted 15 minutes. You've got a level 15 in mid. You're soon to hit that if you're looking at Jarcorrr Variety. And so you're definitely feeling like you've done enough to keep the pace of this game a little more in the realm of your possibility. Plus, you know, that's not even to mention the fact that you're down in kills by 2, but you're up in gold. You're up in experience. Like, you've just been farming better, period. Something that we've seen from the Kings time and time again. And so I love the way that they're forcing this, right? They know they have control. Start the Oni Fury, force the Dragons to respond. If they don't respond here, that was a little close for comfort,
yeah.
Then you can at least then maybe try to force a fight around the Pyromancer. If the Dragons don't respond there, then you've got enough of a lead that you're not even having to wait that much longer for this game to fall right into your lap. You can just keep the pressure up. So I think the Dragons need to start making a stand. They need to draw the line somewhere. This Pyromancer is a good place to start.
With Gold Fury to the Kings, a grouping around Pyro. As everybody aside from Jarcorrr has already made the rotation from the Kings to the right side. They've halted the Dragons from being able to start the objective up. Instead, it's been a lot of poke thrown towards Mike on this level 12 hell now. He's got a couple items online, starting to build up a little bit of that tankiness. Meanwhile, Genetics, again, going for that Thieves and then immediately into the Stone of Binding for some extra help. Pyromancer hinted at again by the Dragons, but nobody from either side willing to make the pull just yet until the Kings have seen that maybe the Dragons aren't willing to step up towards this objective.
I mean, they're daring them, and I don't think they're going to take the bait. And honestly, I don't know that they're going to get much else.
Variety will ult on top of 2, but LASBRA and Nika will go ahead and shut that one down. A kill for the Dragons, a Pyromancer for the Camelot Kings. Variety will take that trade for the time being as it gets an objective for his squad and a runic bomb for the next siege potential.
Variety, dollar bills literally falling out of his pockets. Oh no, I guess I have to go back to base and spend some of this money. He gets a Ratatouille off of that. And yes, it's still a little bit of time that they can catch up and farm, and admittedly, you know, maybe not a big bounty in terms of like kill pressure, but you're going to get some final openings on the right-hand side of the map. You've already lost your tier 1 if you're Nika, so you really needed some pressure over there to help balance things out. You get a level experience lead now over for the Guan Yu. But J-Mac, I'm looking at power spikes, and I feel like the Kings just got a bigger one. You know, knowing that Variety isn't really focused on building tanky and is building for damage, building for just pure kill potential, I think really is making the pace of this game even more nerve-wracking if you're a Dragons fan in my eyes, just because now you're waiting to the 18-minute mark. You're getting a very, very massive performance, potential at least, from Variety. And yeah, Nika's going to be able to tank up a little bit more. The team kind of needs that because they don't have a standard Guardian. But I think they're going to be lacking a little bit in comparison. Serrated Edge was finished there for Twig, and combined with the Bladed Boomerang, you know he's going to stick to targets like glue. You know that it's going to be a lot of good damage as well. A lot of attack speed in this build before we even start to see any prots. So while it hasn't been pick heavy for the Kings or kill heavy for the Kings at all, I feel like they're just playing the map a little smarter, right? You can see them positioning on the map. Probably going to start seeing some of that positioning result in kills. But at this point, you're looking at the Primal Fury. That's probably the only thing that's on their mind is how do we get control over this next objective, this next neutral farm. And I don't think they have to ask the question too seriously. I think the answer is you've already got it. You just got to hold on to it. You've got to be willing. 2 levels in mid, a level up for Jarcorrr. Your carries are doing incredibly well. Their builds are coming along well. So the biggest fear you have to be worried about is the Dragons going for like a Hail Mary Fire Giant at 18 minutes, 19 minutes while you're on the other side of the map. Vision control. Wards, more important than ever over the next few minutes.
Nika in a 2v1 for a moment, but Variety not going to entertain that thought any longer. Now might be a 2v1 thrown towards Variety instead. We saw this just a little while ago. Variety will jump away, but will still go down yet again. Nika credit to another kill, but CaptainTwig slapping around, seeing how much damage he can get out against Nika and LASBRA. Does get quite a bit, but needs just a little bit more follow-up. The Jade Dragons, with 5 kills on the board, just haven't been able to get anything outside of those 5 kills just yet.
Man, Genetics wants a pull so badly over there.
He's trying so hard.
Yeah, it's just not working out for him. Luckily, something is working out for him. With Jarcorrr at this point in the build, you could probably start up the Primal, especially with Tingz coming over. I don't mind them waiting, playing maybe a little patiently. That's the one thing I think I'm still waiting to kick off, right? The Sylvanus has existed, and it's done good in terms of sustain. I want to see the other stuff, right? I want to see it when Genetics isn't the one who's getting pressure put on him, having to ult for disengage. I want to see the pull that is being used, that is followed up by Tingz, by Jarcorrr, by Twig, that is resulting in a kill, that is opening up the door further for the Kings, right? I want to see them not just open it, I want to see them kick a door down. And that's going to come off the back of Genetics. And I need to see it soon. Unfortunately, there's another wide miss. And picks like that, I mean, that's the difference between a Fury and having to wait.
Variety in a new 2v1. This 2v1 does a lot more damage. BigManTingz, though, will return the favor. A 1-for-1 trade. Variety's not worth a whole lot now. BigManTingz is level 20. Will go down to the collapse of the Jade Dragons. And now the Jade Dragons, maybe poised to try and step up for an objective. Dardez is gone, but so is BigManTingz, the big secure for the Camelot Kings. Variety of the front line now gone. The Dragons will start at the Pyromancer. Slow rotation in by the Kings. They've got 3 here. They've got to fight back up against them. CaptainTwig, he's got ultimate to dive into the backline if need be. Pyromancer's getting juggled around. The Dragons do get Pyro. And that should be the end of the fight, unless LASBRA has something to say.
He's got good engage, right? Taunt. Sometimes one of the more powerful tools in Smite, period. But it's not going to result in too much. Tingz, I think, goes... He makes a big difference for the team at the beginning there. Gets a kill onto Dardez. Has to overcommit in order to make sure that it stays that way. Doesn't really change, I think, Grand scheme too much, although you can see, you know, we've been harping on the gold lead. Finally, it feels like the Dragons are pulling enough of it back in their favor. Not all of it. It's not all the way over there yet, but enough that they feel like these 7 kills have made a difference, right? It's not just, okay, we got to pick and then nothing. And Variety, unfortunately, it's going to continue with a build like this. Your Hades is very much committed to one style of play, and that style of play is damage, is an engager, also is going to die pretty quickly, right? LASBRA, if he runs up, starts the fight, Variety just has no choice. It's going to happen at him.
Nika, the other one here for the Fire Giant. The Camelot Kings have 5 people here. LASBRA trying to wrap around the back, but now the rest of the Dragons have come through. The fire goes to the Kings, but the fight is starting for the Jade Dragons. Nika strikes one before he goes down, but now with Dardez out, and the damage raining from Vote, not enough to take out Twig or Variety. It's 3 for 1. And now it might be an extra one. Vote with no relics, a couple of crits from Yark will spell the end of the road for one. LASBRA able to take out another one and get his escape out. 3 with Fire Giant for the Kings, and only LASBRA left alive.
You got some sustain to get in there, and with a build like this, I mean, you got another auto attacker in Vamana. This is going to be a really good siege for them with the Fire Giant, especially with the minion wave coming down. I love that they forced LASBRA out of this fight as well. And yeah, you might have been able to heal up some. Maybe LASBRA could even come play Disruptor if necessary, but you're going to get a lot, despite losing 2, out of this siege immediately from the Kings. Should be the Primal as well. Fall back after that. You're going to have a massive, massive amount of gold in the 3 pockets of the guys that we see still standing right there. And then, J-Mac, you have to imagine you'll have, let's call it after backs, a minute and a half, maybe minute 15 power play with the belt around you. Could result in some pressure immediately onto left, which would be an ideal tier 2, ideal Phoenix to try and get. Maybe you just get one of the tier 2s in general, reset for the Fire Giant. It's taking a little longer to get back to base than I expected. And so it might just be shorted right there, right? You strip the jungle, get what you can, get some really massive power-ups, really good upgrades and starters. Then you have to play the patience button. And that's the thing that, again, this Fire Giant change really does make a difference. When it was 4 minutes on the buff into a 4-minute respawn timer, it was this really weird period where you still had the 4 minutes, you know, for the buff to work out. So you could theoretically get a lot done in that little bit of time. And it was much more difficult to try and set back up to get the groove back, let's say, for the team that lost it. Because, hey, guess what? Your Fire Giant buff disappears. Cool, you can just start killing it now. Now you still have that 1 minute grace period, which will give the Dragons a much-needed time to maybe try and reset and come into the next one. But with only 3 minutes to work with on the buff itself, now 45 seconds left for the power play for the Kings, it's a little harder to get to the Phoenix line and a little harder to siege the base as quickly and as maybe dynamically as we've gotten used to seeing over the last few years.
It's definitely an adjustment period for both these squads, and because as you mentioned, it's only just recently we're seeing that 3 minutes of buff activity versus the former 4 that's been 4 minutes of activity for the buff for, what now, 9 years of play just about. The Camelot Kings so far have made strong adjustments in that regard, utilizing their first minute or so of the Fire Giant to take out the 2 towers in mid, took out the Fury on the left side of the map, and now a Pyromancer as well. Camelot Kings have amassed an 8,000 gold lead over the Jade Dragons. Not quite the stark 20k lead that we saw last game just yet, Gore, but we're certainly on the way there. So for the Jade Dragons, try and answer back to this. They still have their tower up. They still have all Phoenixes. Fire Giant just now wearing off. How are you feeling about the Jade Dragons maybe on this next Fire Giant defense, or possibly even a defense around one of these structures?
Honestly, with their relics, I feel like they could step up to the FG. Right, if they had lost to Phoenix, it becomes a very different conversation. Because they didn't, I want to see them play around it. Primal Fury is definitely going to lend an edge over to the Kings, so that might cause some trouble. But I think they should step up to it. You've got a lot of tankiness that you didn't have prior. Your relics, as mentioned just a second ago, are all up. Hasten Wings just now picked up for Mike. Good ults, good zone control. The downside is where the engage is going to be, right? And we saw this. You can 50-50 the Fire Giant. It becomes a little precarious. Maybe leaning in favor of the Kings slightly just because they have a Runic Bomb that if they so desire, they can drop on it. Tings has a good amount of damage. But if you can get Dardez to step up, LASBRA to throw someone into the crypts themselves, it's a lot of damage. And you could strip someone away pretty quickly. Variety has to play carefully. We've seen how quickly that health bar disappears. So I think that there's a lot of pressure the Dragons can have to step up. I just don't think they're in control. I think they're the responders here to the King's aggression.
Genetics. He wants that pull so badly. Has not come up
Not a lot of them
just
this game.
yet. Finds a double root. Quick cleanse. Variety to the back line and immediately back out as the Empty the Crypts has been unleashed. Variety stunned out. Quick beads to get away from the cavalry charge, but it's 2 ultimates down for the Dragons. Nothing besides the relics for Variety on the Camelot Kings. As the Kings back away towards Fire Giant. He can set up for it all once more, or maybe bait the Jade Dragons back into a fight.
Dardez lost beads as well. Much more difficult to try and get aggressive for the op wash, right? Immobile, and now no CC immunity. With no ult as well. Feels like it's a little more complex to get aggressive. I'm surprised that the Kings are playing this as laid back maybe as they are. And I think a lot of it is going to be around their engage, right? Variety without Blink, it's going to be a lot more telegraph. Genetics, you know what he's been trying to do. We've been talking about it all game. It's just whether or not he can finally get that pull. That's going to make a big difference, and there's the big one.
It's on to PBM, pulled back through, just a little bit of HP, but PBM or BT will stomp him down. But it's a 1-for-1 as Dardez has found a pick onto CaptainTwig, instantly back in the fight. A 1-for-1 trade. Health bar a bit low on Genetics. He'll have some sustain through his own kit to keep him alive. A little bit healthier for the Dragons as the Camelot Kings back away. They finally found their pull, but it did end up costing them 1 life.
Yeah, Twig going down there is a huge deal. I mean, the trade ultimately does favor the Dragons, right? Twig worth way more than Mike is at that any given moment. But it doesn't really open up anything. You know, you would think maybe that's a surge forward. Yeah, we lost a healer, but we still have some sustain. Maybe we can get something done. Instead, you have to play very patiently. You have to be careful about where you're going to get spotted on the map. A lot of ward coverage, again, right now is very important. And with the Primal Fury Part 2, I mean, the second one now going over towards the Kings, we're talking about a Fire Giant that should be, once again, pretty easily done. Secure. I mean, at this point, it feels like it's 50-50 on any objective that both teams are willing to step up to. Should be Pyromancer for the Kings here as well, without much contest. And I would not be surprised if the Dragons are just trying to wait 30 seconds. Same thing over for the Kings. Get beats back up on Variety, get all the relics back up for Dardez in there and Mike. Reset. By the time that this Fire Giant goes down, J-Mac, it's going to be enhanced, and it's going to be a game changer.
Double Runic Bomb in pocket for the Kings, but one as well for the Jade Dragons. So not the easiest confirm for either team. Some steal possibility for both of them. The Jade Dragons, 10,000 gold down. Full builds for majority of the roster of the Camelot Kings as well. Nearly everybody on the Dragons fighting at least 1 item down. But showed some resilience in that last team fight, Gore. I mean, as mentioned, Genetics finally got the pick that he was looking for. Maybe not the most ideal target on the PBM. Took a little bit longer than maybe the Kings were hoping for. Because of that, the Dragons were able to find a 1-for-1 trade. But now the Camelot Kings, once again, grouping up, but this time without CaptainTwig, as he's pushing up mid and has left his team by themselves.
I love this play, assuming it goes in a way that Twig's going to get something massive. Instead, it's just going to be a back, right? He's not able to find anyone, really cut anyone off. So the rest of the team's just delaying. LASBRA could get a really good jump to the back line here. Jarcorrr has both relics, has a lot of damage, good itemization as well, but has to be very, very careful about letting LASBRA, or in this case even Vote, get a little bit of damage thrown his way. Your sustain can only do so much. You'd be relying heavily on a Bloodforge shield to make something big happen.
Well, Variety caught out by Vote. A lot of damage. Vote goes up to the sky. Will rain some damage back against CaptainTwig, but mostly for escape as the firebolts from the house are slamming through the backline. LASBRA has nearly found one. BNC tries to do it around, but the poison has spread, and LASBRA has grabbed a double kill for himself. CaptainTwig and the Camelot Kings on the run. The Jade Dragons want to start this Fire Giant. Vote is low. Has to get some resustain back from the team. The Dragons will head to fire.
Look, that's such a beautiful set of plays. You get to the back line, you get your ult and your poison to spread onto the people that you need it the most. Jarcorrr already used a lot of the utility. And so it's just a good dive, good weight in the shrouded grass to really open up what you need as the Dragons. And this is going to be a very easily secured Fire Giant. J-Mac, they needed this one, though. Because when you look at the map state, it's not necessarily favorable for them right now anyway. It's going to help. I mean, looking at this Fire Giant, looking at the towers on map, a lot of gold ready to fall into the pockets. And suddenly you're talking about an even game. I mean, you're going to get 1,000 from the tier 1s together, and then 1,500 per tier 2. So up to 4,500 gold that you can really start to swing in your favor after you start taking up, what, another 1,000? So 5,500 plus the FG. Now that you've got FG, your camps are going to help out, but you can really start to look at what I just saw pinged out there, the Oni Fury that is going to be spawning. So if you're the Dragons, What you are fighting for right now is equal map state. If you are the Kings, you are making sure that that stays equal and that you don't give up too many kills. A couple of picks from the Dragons, EFG. You might not care too much about the fact that there's 4 towers standing. All you need to do is knock down a couple of them. You could potentially go for the Titan itself. So the Kings have to play carefully. Defensively, they're going to be fine on it. They got a good mage, long range. Good engage as well with all their relics coming back up. But the pressure's on. They're just trying to be penalty killers here, man. Nothing too crazy. Buy as much time as you possibly can. Make sure the Dragons don't get as much out of it. I highlighted so much they could do to get a lot of gold. We've seen a single tier tower fall down. And with the Oni Fury going to the Kings here, I will not be surprised if in a second that Fire Giant power play graphic dictates that the Dragons might actually be under in terms of some of the gold that they've picked up here. With the Pyromancer, it might put it just over. But yeah, it's 800 total, which is a drop at 34 minutes.
Camelot Kings, they got 2 runic bombs. They used one.
Are they just base racing?
They're just going straight through.
They're
Genetics
just gonna go
gotta
for it.
keep them all busy. While the Camelot Kings will sneak around the back of the Jade Dragons. LASBRA's here. Poisonous spread onto one. He tries to save this one, but one lone Serqet cannot stop the Camelot Kings, who have marched right back to the back line and swept the set 2-0.
Now what you can do right there, screen cap that map. Because what do you see when you look at the bottom half? There's a single ward, and it's the King's ward at that. They have no vision, nothing to see if anyone's going there. Admittedly, that's just a bold call from the Kings. That is nothing short of just really good shot calling and good map awareness. But when they step up to that Fury and they see no resistance, and they start going further in the jungle, and they see nothing, and Genetics is very conveniently in mid saying, hey guys, they're still rushing here, they don't know you're there, go for it. Like, that is when that floodgate opens. And all of a sudden, you get to just push. And if it's just a Phoenix, that's still a huge win. You've got enough time to back and mount a defense around your own. But the fact that Genetics is able to keep everyone engaged in that small area in a very, very... I mean, look, you're never going to see that play made in 90% of games, 99% of games. Being able to find a good opening for that, create even more of an opening because you have a great position for your support, does not matter whether or not he lives in that instant. The other 4 get the job done.
Genetics holds them back at the tier 2, so the Camelot Kings can roll right over the Jade Dragons in game number 2. A bit of a slow burn of one, but a win at the end of the day. The Kings win out 2-0. That's it for us on the cast. Go to the desk to break it down.
That game 2 is one where the Camelot Kings, gold-wise, probably should have felt a bit more comfortable in the way that they won it. And they're able to get it done. But really what it is stopping the momentum of the Dragons, Myth, who really felt like we're starting to come back into that game. They get a Fire Giant. They are down in gold, but they have the momentum the last couple of picks. Start to work. LASBRA's really starting to hit his stride on that Serqet. And so that's a moment. I don't think we're at desperation point if we're the Kings yet.
Not yet.
But that is a play that's like, okay, we can sense that the Dragon's starting to rumble back into this game a bit. Let's end it right now.
Yeah, I really like the wherewithal from the Camelot Kings to be willing to make a decision like that, considering the pace of the game up until that point. You're winning handily. The majority of objectives are going your way. You're feeling very confident about what you're able to build up for yourself until that point. The Jade Dragons sure show signs of fight back. A bit of momentum starts to mount, sure. But the decision of, look, we can risk it now, and it's probably going to go in our favor. We've got Genetics in a good position to hold the defense. Let's just go ahead, stop some backs, make it happen. I mean, that just speaks wonders to not only the shot calling, but the trust in the shot call. I mean, calls like that, maybe easy to say, hard to make a team execute on.
And I think that's a game, it would have been a big statement for the Jade Dragons. Think about the emotion that they're now having to go through as a team. It's early in the year, so it's not that dramatic. But
Set 1 would have been nice to get a dub.
Right, but it's a moment where you're behind 8,000 gold, whatever it was, and you're like, okay, we're fighting back in, and it's starting to trend where the Dragons are maybe making things interesting, and then you lose in that type of way. That's a really, really difficult moment, I think, to look at. I think the Jade Dragons still figuring out exactly what the meta looks like for their team. Played some unique picks in this set. Played the Martichoras a couple of times. Still don't think it was the issue, but
no,
didn't notch a win yet here for this team. I think ultimately what we're seeing now is where a team who clearly has an identity with one another in the Camelot Kings, they all get together. And once they're able to figure out the meta, they've got this consistent, clean play style, and that's always going to be hard to beat early in the year.
It will be. And I thought it's going to be something the Camelot Kings would struggle to develop as the meta has been shifting so much. But clearly, concise communication, strong team fight presence, and a good idea of how you want to play together in these jungle engagements seems to be a bit meta-resistant, right? It's resistant to patches. You can't patch out good team play and good communication, good decision-making, regardless of how much the game changes around it. These guys work together as a unit, and that is just so difficult to beat.
Agreed. I think the statement has now been made by the Kings that they can win the slow burn, consistent, group up, objective style games like we saw in Game 1. We actually saw indicators of that here in Game 2, but also they can make calls that just end the game when they find those opportunities. Camelot Kings 2-0 over the Jade Dragons to start their year here in Season 10. And BigManTingz with J-Mac to tell us about it.
Yeah, that's right. BMT, mid laner for the Camelot Kings, with me for our post-game interview. BMT, talk to me a little bit about maybe the identity of the Kings. We talked to you about a lot about you guys last season, where it was this really slow, methodical play, going for the objectives, things like the Scorpions and whatnot, the towers, the obelisks, kind of the big thing of Season 9. Took a lot of that away, and maybe a lot of questions were up. Is that going to be the same style of the Kings? You think that kind of still echoes through that very slow style of late game play for your team?
I feel like that's still like our core identity deep down, but with how the map's changed and how other teams are also playing, we also have to adapt our play as well. So we're trying to be better to get different play styles, I guess, and not just rely on the slow, methodical gameplay.
Were you worried at all in that second game? I mean, as the game kept going through, Dragons kept stacking up kill after kill. You guys are still sitting there, 1, maybe 2 kills midway through that game, but gold is still kind of peaking up your favor. I think at one point we looked 15 minutes in, your guys are up 2,000 gold. Any worry in your mind at that point when the Jade Dragons are still finding those picks?
I don't think so. I feel like we were pretty comfortable throughout the whole game, and we made a bit of a misplay, which got them back in the game. They got an FG, but we were pretty much in control. And then, thankfully, we made a pretty good call at the end when they thought they had control. We won the game with it. So,
yeah, run me through that last little play there, because that was kind of just seemingly out of nowhere. You guys move over towards the Fury, and you start routing through the jungle and go for the Phoenix. Whose call was it to kind of make a play through that jungle and then go for the end as well?
I hate giving him credit, but it was Sam's call, genetics. But yeah, no, it was a good call. It was executed exactly as we needed it to. Only one of them got the back off, so it was a pretty free end in the grand scheme of things.
Well, you guys got the big win against the Jade Dragons. The first and only time you'll face off against them in this phase. Congrats on the win. We'll throw back to Des to keep going.
Thanks.
So both of our SPL sets today, 2-0s, and the Camelot Kings end it with a 2-0 over the Jade Dragons. And BMT talking about it there, Miff, not too concerned about the state of the game, feel like they can still play their identity, and that's a worrying thought for maybe the rest of the league. 2 SPL sets down in year 10, and we've got 6 more to go this weekend, where we started our day with an SCC set over in EU. Remember to stay tuned after broadcast today for some North American SMITE Challenger Circuit games. The community broadcast team will be right back at it tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Eastern Time with EU matches in the SCC. And then we will have 3 SPL games, all best of 3. Styx Ferryman, Gilded Gladiator start us off. Eldritch Hounds, Highland Ravens right in the middle. The last set of the day, Oni Warriors, Atlantis Leviathans, followed by the North American SCC community broadcast. That Saturday, we will run back the same exact format on Sunday with SPL starting at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, sandwiched in by community SCC broadcast. So there is plenty of SMITE competitive action all weekend long for the next couple of months or so, Miff. We've got plenty of it here today. I think you look back to today, 2 2-0 sets. It's the Camelot Kings finding a win. It's the Highland Ravens finding a win. Both of them relatively convincing fashion. Is the Ravens the big surprise of the day, or do you know they had it in them all along?
Look, I may have not had firsthand experience with how strong the Ravens were going to be, but when every SPL player I have talked to has told me that the Ravens are a team to be contended with, I took their word for it, and I was not overly surprised by their incredibly strong performance.
Agreed. Ravens look like a good team, look like a threatening team. Camelot Kings, they just won Worlds, and they've got that talent with them again here in Season 10. That is only day number 1 of Season 10 of the SMITE Pro League. Remember, 9 a.m. Eastern Time for the Community SCC broadcast, 11 a.m. Eastern Time for the SPL tomorrow right here, twitch.tv. Twitch.tv/SMITE.
you got it.
That's
Yeah.
us. I was so confident, and then I bailed myself out. I've been Dolson. That's Mifflin on behalf of us, the other casters, everyone back in production. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow.